Okay, so episode 9, got the boys all back in town. We've got Matty Martin, Ashwin Acharya, and Atlas Corrin. So all the boys from first 3 episodes will come back together to talk about some topics that we've all been negotiating over the past few weeks, and we want to get out there and I guess talk about, you could say. And I want to kick it off straight away with Matty. I want to ask you, what is your definition of pride? I then want Ash to elaborate on Matty's response, and then Alice to potentially comment or ask the first question on your thoughts about both Ash and Matty's
We're ready to go.
breakdown on pride.
Yeah, I
So
appreciate that. So I think we have to. It's careful when we talk about pride because colloquial can't even say it.
Colloquially.
Yeah, we
I got you, bro.
Thank you. we talk about it a little bit all over the shop. So you could be proud of your kids, or you could be proud of your footy team, or you could be proud of yourself, and it can mean different things. So sometimes we mean like I'm grateful for, or I'm encouraged by. But other times it can be more arrogance. And what I would say separates pride in terms of like it's not good is that type of pride focuses on self. And I would say pride in the way where I'm grateful for, or I'm encouraged by, focuses on others and fosters a sense of humility. But yeah, so I guess that's how I would delineate it, the different ways of using it. So if you're saying like I'm proud of this or I'm proud of that, and you're talking about like in terms of I'm encouraged by or I'm grateful for, or that's great. If it's focusing on others, it's great. If it's focusing on yourself in terms of like I'm better than someone else, or
Mm.
I'm getting ahead kind of thing, that's not really what I would want to foster in people. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how much deeper. Like I'll pass it over.
I was struck by the word pride. I remember recently, like you know the word prince. A principle is like a first cause. So the prince is like the original. It all has to stream out from that. And I think there's a similarity in the root of pride. It's like if this thing comes back to me as the principal cause and source of glory and everything, there's something very unhealthy and untrue about that. But if, yeah, as Matty was saying, you're differentiating like pride in things, pride that becomes encouragement or esteem, that's not false and pretentious. Yeah, even esteem can kind of backflip if it's false esteem. There's this beautiful prayer called the Litany of Humility. And one of the lines is like, deliver me from the desire to be esteemed. And you think to be esteemed is to be estimated. Imagine if everyone estimated, oh, Ashwin, he can bench 100 kilos, like good for him. And I like that they esteem me that way, until there's a kid buried under a 100-kilo block of wood in a burning building. They're like, quick, Ash, go help the kid. And I can't because of the false esteem. So I'd want them to esteem me accurately, and I'd want to be proud of my actual abilities. And I'd want to be very in touch with who I am and what I can do. Yeah, I think that's pride. I think that's good, healthy pride. I did have some other thoughts, but they've sort of escaped me now. Did I mention encouragement?
No, I don't believe so, no.
No. So like, I think good pride, like I have pride in Matty. I have pride in Atlas. I have pride in Lachy. For what reason? Well, I like what you're doing and I want to encourage it. I want to invest in it. I want you to feel proud of it. I don't see how that could be a bad thing. Like, where does it go wrong? Unless we become a little weird cult of just glorifying ourselves. And I don't think it naturally heads that way.
I want to say, just to caution that's great. Like we don't want to make pride in the whole sense of the word like evil, so much to say, but you what you started with, I would tie it to what you ended with, where you were saying like I'm proud of Atlas. But what am I proud of him for? Like to what end?
Yes.
Am I proud of Atlas glorifying God? Or am I proud of Atlas becoming the richest man in the world and buying his favorite car? And do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So it's all
Beautiful.
contextual. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I would definitely focus on the reason. And I like to focus mainly in life on like the purpose of things, like why are we doing that? And I think that often like when I didn't understand it, I just thought pride was a good thing. But when you look at the reason as to why some people use it, it's to feel good about doing something bad and to encourage bad behavior because they want to feel good about doing bad behavior themselves. And so once I started to actually recognize that, like I saw that as a problem, and I still certainly say like, oh, I'm proud of this person because, like you say, you want to encourage good behavior. But how do I know I have the right
Yeah.
calibration? You know,
Spot on.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I was thinking when you were talking.
Yeah,
Because
Yeah.
what you're saying like good and evil. Where does that come from? You know what I mean? Like there's
Yes.
so many assumptions
Yep.
in everything that we do day
Yeah.
to day. We all know what good and evil is, right?
Mm.
Okay.
Evidently not. But no, I definitely I like to focus on things that can help people in general because I find that, and we'll dive deeper more into this later, but I find that a lot of uh, people that I respect and like in the realm of religion and Catholicism, they focus, I find, a little bit too much on things that aren't very useful because I find that God should be useful. Like it should be the thing that helps you in everything. And so if we focus on what can actually help people, then it actually ends up turning people to God anyway. But then when you start out from a position of, all right, well, I'm assuming God is good for you, they just kind of react to it. I find, but yeah.
I missed you on the last part. I was with you there for the whole thing. You said when you assume God is good for you, who reacts to it?
Who reacts to it?
You said they react to it and they're like,
oh, right. They
withdraw.
pull back, like mainly just anyone, family, friends, acquaintances
Like
that
secular.
aren't faith, but it's secular, correct? Yes.
Yeah, I can understand where you're going with that. All I would say is to summarize the point that I just got from you is I think you're saying they focus too much on things that aren't helpful.
Correct.
But I would say that the faith or the gospel is ever ancient, ever new. So it's like
That's right.
it's always relevant and it's always should be at the center.
Yes.
But how do we apply it might be what you're getting at.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We need to be able to apply it to like God is great for everyone. We just need to figure out a way to help people to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely find in that situation you can't force people into things, especially like religion. It's kind of like forcing a kid to eat vegetables. They're gonna want to eat vegetables even less
Well,
when you do that.
Well, I would say anyone that's, you got to understand the term force, but anyone that's using force or forcing something on someone is not in the Christian spirit.
You can beguile their conscience, like quicken and awaken their conscience.
But I guess the one question I see, well, that I hear a lot and see is mum and dad, massive faith in the church, force the 4 kids to go to church every day, every Sunday they're there. They have grace every night at dinner. The way they act in the home is very Christian-like. They get older and they despise the church. They go their separate ways and don't.
I would love to respond to that.
100%.
And I think that goes back to what you're saying off camera about your childhood and how your parents made you do things that you hated at the time. So I would say I plan on doing that with my kids. Do you know what I mean? Like they're going to church. They don't have a choice. But where I would say people have gone amiss in the situation that you just described is it's my role and hopefully the church's role combined, the community's role, to give them solid rationality why they're going. And that's a long period of time. And people can be rebellious and prideful in terms of, I know better than you.
Yes.
Do you think that's why a lot of these kids are actually not following through the church? They just believe that this is all rubbish. Like
100%.
I know what's best for me.
That's it. And that gets to the core question that you asked is pride. I know better than.
Even if it's I don't know best, it's like I deserve to choose an inferior. Like they wouldn't articulate it that way. But I think that's part of freedom is a higher good than the truth itself. So even if that is true, I want to express freedom. You know what I mean? And it's like that's a that's a kind of warped self-sacrifice.
Yeah, yeah. Like you see it, like it's quite exaggerated,
Mm.
but you can see it with people. They're like, oh yeah, like I think God's real, but they're just doing some whack stuff. Like,
It's. I just want to add on that. It's funny when you see a lot of people wearing the cross,
Yeah.
yeah,
and they are just
yeah.
the furthest away from being a
Yeah.
representative of our religion. And sometimes I get frustrated.
Mm.
They're wearing it, and just the way they speak and act, it's just like,
Yeah, even these like, like even these
Are you wearing
these
a cross? No.
I am actually wearing a cross. I actually took it off for a while because I saw all these people at the gym, like especially like just a lot of young blokes that, you know, get up to some, you know, crap, wearing the cross. And I was just like, oh, well, I don't want to be a part of that.
Mm.
But then I thought, well, that's not why I'm wearing it.
Mm.
Like it's actually for me to be connected to Jesus. So I was like, nah, I got it. I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. Is like people will use symbols
Mm.
how they see fit, and it could be an error, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't use the symbol and
Yeah.
in the correct
Reclaim
way.
it. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, reclaim it is a good word. It's like
Yeah.
we should be good representatives of the faith.
Mhm.
But to what Locky's saying, I would say we got to be careful in how we treat them. We could say, well, we're not really happy with their behavior, but we don't want to condemn them and say,
yeah,
beneath me, because that's pride.
That's
Mm.
yeah.
We need to be charitable and try to work with them if they're open to it. Do you know what I mean? Like offer an olive branch, so to say. And I can think of a fight show I was at on the weekend that I was judging on, and there was a guy that come into the cage with a huge cross around his neck and another one in his hand. And I don't know him. And part of the judgmental side of me is like, this is great to see. Like it was encouraging to start. And then the way he conducted himself in the match was a little bit not a good representative on face value, but everyone has good and bad days. And it probably would have been better for me to find him out the back room later and have private conversations about his faith journey and try to encourage him to go further. Do you know what I mean? Rather than like, oh, he's not a good example. He's beneath me.
Yeah, 100%. I'd like to add to that one thing I'm working on a lot for myself is trying not to judge people on first appearance. Like give them maybe 3 at least. Because
After that, they're out.
but I guess like, you know, everyone does have their good and bad days. Like you don't know what that person's been through the past week or that day, or even the past year. And to be able to just judge them on that one mood anyway, it's quite, I guess you could say, I don't
It's
know,
not Christian-like.
it's not Christian-like, but you know, you could say that's maybe prideful. I guess just judging them straight off the bat, like, oh, this terrible guy.
Well, judging comes into this, and can I say, as a priest, as a confessor, I hear this a lot, and I don't think I'm not breaching any seal by saying this because it's so common that people say, "Father, I'm judgmental. I'm judging," you know, and it's like, okay, there's a few things going on. One is you have a brain that's going to find patterns and is going to look for the good and the bad. So if I look out into the traffic and I see patterns of bad driving, I'm allowed to judge that driving as bad. I'm allowed to make a judgment on objective stuff like that. What the scriptures caution us against is making ultimate, like, destinational judgments on a person, saying like, that person drives like a lunatic, they deserve to die. They deserve to get in a big crash. No, wait a minute. You don't get to decide what they deserve. You can judge that behavior needs some amending, and you don't know what's going on for them. They could be speeding to the hospital. Who knows? But there's a big difference between judging and judging. It's like, how far does my judgment go? Do I think I can allot people to their eternal destiny? No, I'm not God. Like, only God can do that.
And that would be pride.
That would be big pride.
And also, what's the purpose for your judging?
Yeah.
It can be a good thing. It can be used for a bad thing.
That's what I find. Like a lot of times I'm judgmental. It's because maybe it's something that I don't have that they do. And that makes me jealous in a way, you could say. And then I feel the need to make myself feel better to shit on them in a way. To cover my reasoning why, you know.
Why you're lacking in that certain
Yeah.
It's funny because you're like the least person. but yeah, I was just going to say you're the least person like that, but it is still important to always be working on that kind of stuff. And I'm the exact same way.
I love the vulnerability that he just showed.
beautiful.
Absolutely.
because that's a pattern that everyone can relate to, I think.
I feel like you're always going to have it. You're always going to have it. You're going to, because us as Christians, and myself as well, working on, and Alice and I talk about this, is about material objects and ownings. It's like, I'm really starting to realize that life is about people and love over everything else. But you still see that guy who has that material object, and for a split second it catches you, like, I just wish I had that.
Yeah.
And you got to pull yourself back.
So I don't mean to cut you off, but it's a really good point. And what I want to say is to identify that as envy, which is covetousness, like you're wanting what someone else has.
I feel like it's just human nature though that we do that.
But it's a fallen human nature.
Yeah. So this is the topic that's going to be beneath everything that we've got. Is you're saying it's human nature or it's natural to feel that way, and he's saying it's a fallen nature, which is the Christian perspective.
Yep.
Sorry, bro.
You're good.
But what we're getting at is that sin, the root of all sin, lies in man's heart. So it's like it's here. You know what I mean? Like it's natural, but is it contrary to reason and good? Do you know what I mean? Like you can feel a certain way and kind of want to do something that your conscience is saying that's not good, and your reason can get you to change your mind. Does that make sense?
I'm seeing more and more people getting because they can reason to get to the bad place.
Yeah, you can, but you dull your conscience as you do that. So you're going to get duller and duller.
I think that's key, because what you said is spot on. People will justify any behavior. And if you think about, I've never met a person that says, yeah, I'm a bad guy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
The saints say it.
Yeah.
The
But
saints know.
like I think of some of the people in my life that surprised me in what their capacity for doing bad things was. And they never thought that, and still to this day, don't think that they were doing bad.
I'm
And-
not as
and
bad
people-
as.
Hey?
I'm not as bad as.
Yeah, well, not
not
even
murdering.
that. It's sometimes it's a competition, and I'm not as bad as this person, or at least I didn't. But sometimes it's more, I think, what Atlas is getting at, where it's like, no, it's good because of ABC. I'm justified. Do you know what I mean? Like they deserve it because
Well, they did this to me.
therefore
It's fair enough that I
Yep,
did
yep.
this.
I have to defend myself. Whatever it is, you know what I
defend
mean?
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard for a man to be able to walk away with that, I guess, that loss of battle, for a man to be able to walk away from the battle. How would you put it? Need someone to back me up.
Well, it's a sacrificial move instead of a conquering move.
Yeah, like take the high road, just go away from the crap. Don't fall into the secular nature.
Yeah. You know what I want to say? This makes me think of what I was going to bring up as part of, and I want to get to it. I want you to ask me those questions. But you asked me briefly on it. You just sent a message like, why should young people like go to the faith or become Christian or look into it? And like on a surface level from a Christian, it's like, it's good for you. But once I started thinking about it, I was like, well, what's the alternative? Because I feel like the best thing that you can do for them to start with is start calling out, pointing out, hey, you've assumed this and you've assumed that. And where does this belief come from? And why do you think this? Because there's a lot of things that are common sense in young people.
Yeah.
They don't know where it comes from, and they wouldn't even put their finger on it that that's something that they're believing.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just like the water that they're
Yep.
swimming in.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So to link it to what you guys were saying is love. Like, what is love, and how should I love best, and how do I know?
That's cool, because people can be like, I love chocolate, but also love my mum. It's like, whoa.
Equally.
You know what I mean? Like, how do you define love? And I heard someone talking about this the other day. It's like how much I'm willing to sacrifice for that thing or that person. That's how he
interesting.
defined
Interesting.
love. And
Well,
I thought that was awesome. That definition.
That's perfect Christian definition of love has to be self-sacrificing. And if you think about all of the things that inspire you, even in secular culture, like a Marvel hero is like, I'm all powerful, but I'm sacrificing to protect you. Do you know what I mean? Even like nursery rhymes and Disney movies for kids, especially in times gone by. It might be changing now, but all of the famous classical ones, it's a guy risking his life, like, which is a form of sacrifice to get the girl, you know what I mean? Or the princess or whatever you want to see. A lot of that kind of, think about all the heroes, think about a war story.
Or
You know
just
what
the
I mean?
hero's journey. Like he
Yeah,
has to sacrifice
exactly.
something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what is the ultimate version of that? It's Jesus. Do you know what I mean? And how so? And you know, I'm hearing Peterson's voices in my head when I'm saying
the
this.
myth, the incarnate myth.
Yeah.
Can I say, at the very beginning we were talking about pride, and I was trying to think of pride as a virtue, but there's something about virtue where they are knitted together; they don't cancel each other out. So if there were to be a good inflection of pride, it would have to be congruent with humility. And if pride swallows humility, then it's negative. And if humility swallows like esteem and makes you just turn into a pile of dust, that's negative as well. Take the hero's journey. Like, I'm willing to sacrifice my life, etc., so that I make a name for myself. Well, now it's not sacrifice anymore. Yeah, you've wrecked it. Like, it's still about you. You've got a complex.
So I'm a legend.
Yeah.
I'm remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you were trying to save yourself.
Yeah.
In this very dramatic, stupid fashion.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is not self-sacrifice.
That's
no, it's not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. It's veiled.
Yeah.
I
definitely want to get more into the youth and why they've gone so far away from Christianity. Because like you talk to people nowadays and Christianity is such a joke to them.
Well, I know one reason, and Matty and I were talking about this a long time ago about, for example, like a lot of teachers that now aren't Catholic, and they're going around saying that this guy called Jesus is not real, and telling that to the students. Well, that's what I think students who are training at Matty's gym were saying, that there's teachers that they're just, it's just ridiculous.
Like they have to tell the story, but they're saying this is a fictional story.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's so to put some context on that story. It's a student, more than one. There was a group of young lads talking about, joking about Christianity, and then I was saying, well, you know, what's going on? Where are you getting this from? And they said, in jest, they said, well, even our RI or RE teacher, whatever it is, doesn't believe. And I'm like, what gives you that impression? And they're like, oh, he told us so. And it's like, okay. Then I changed their mind in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
With like, well, what do you think happened here? And I walked them through 5 minutes of what's the answer to this? And they're like, they didn't say like, oh, that makes.
I'm Christian.
No, it wasn't a conversion story, but it
at
was
least
like,
they thought about it.
Yeah, and it was like that. They're good points. I don't know how to answer them.
Yeah.
I think that is where we need to get to. We need to talk about like, well, what's the alternative? And it's going to boil down to connect to the points that I've been making about self-sacrifice has to be the way that we embody love or show love. But if God isn't real and you're a secular atheist, why would you sacrifice yourself for someone else? One. And what is your ultimate priority? If your ultimate priority is to get ahead or to save yourself or to worship yourself or elevate yourself or give yourself a name, why would you then, how is it congruent to sacrifice yourself or love someone else? It's only a business transaction. Hey, I'll love you as long as it's good for me, as long as I get something from it.
Yeah.
That's not what love is.
And they pervert what the idea of love is.
Yeah.
They pervert what the idea of a relationship is.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting because I talk to, you know, like my brother, for example, one of my brothers, he lives for himself. And when I question that, and I've tried to become a lot more easy with my questions because I have certainly come across as like just assuming, you know, this is the way, blah, blah, blah. But I've just questioned them, and it just always boils down to, well, that's just what I want to do. That's just, it's for me, you know, working, you know, cars, you know, the house, all this stuff. It's just for me. And that just doesn't make sense to me. Like if it's all just for me, it just doesn't, there has to be something deeper.
Yeah. So obviously I agree completely with your position, but I want to say that story you told of your brother is totally typifies the normal person in society.
Right.
And it's also not just normal, but it's encouraged throughout the culture. to do it for you, and like even the point of like over exaggerated individualization.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? It's
Mm.
like it's about
Yes.
you and
Yep.
who
Yes.
are you, and
Mhm.
it's
Well, I saw a uni ad just the other day. I think it was a CQ uni ad. It was talking about do what feels right now. And it was like a meme of what that should be like. It was just showing this one person doing a whole bunch of different stuff. Of course, the unis want you to do that. They'll get more money. Like if you're never going to finish your degree, you're never going to use it. Yeah, it's just like do what feels right now. It's like that's insane to me. That's crazy.
I want to talk about a story. Talking about your brother, I want to stay on that point. It's not your brother. It's just a typical young person, because that's what you asked me about, and I'm like, there's so much we can talk about with that. But there was another young person that I can relate to in my gym recently, and you know, he was, I wouldn't say a typical young guy, but he's lacking a little bit of motivation and he's lacking ambition, because if it's all for yourself, then it comes down to like, well, what are you comfortable with? And some of us have natural ambition where we're like ultra competitive, but other people, they're not that competitive, you know? And if they're just doing it for themselves, they're complacent. They're happy. This is
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm happy just to smoke some weed and play some computer games and go and see my mates on a Friday night. It's a good life for me, you know? And I said to him, hey, you know, we are in a place and time in history, and we're not like floating in space on our own. So think about your life as every day. If we just don't even look at history yet, we just look at today. Well, we're in a community. So you go to the shops and get food. You get what you want. Like so many people come together to allow that to happen just for you to eat. There's clean running water to your house. You know what I mean? That there's sewage to your house. There's hot and cold. There's electric. There's literally thousands upon thousands of people working so that you can get what you take for granted every day. Don't you feel some sort of, I should contribute? I should.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Look at all these incredible people doing all these amazing things for me. I want to help them. What can I do? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that is such an obvious thing to look at. And then the other side of it is the historical component. We are today in the richest and most informationally rich age that we've ever been in. You can get so much so easily compared to history. I've heard people like alike the basic person as living better than a king in the history. Do you know what I mean? So imagine all of the sacrifices from ancestral times to now to get to where we are. Don't you feel some sort of stewardship or sense of obligation to like, what can I do? Like I must be, all of their sacrifice can't be for me to play a video game and you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you said that it's so obvious. Why is it not obvious to them?
Because
It demands. It makes a demand on them.
yeah, it's uncomfortable.
They have to do something.
Yeah,
They have to change.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but the culture worships the self. Like everyone's pushing things on the self, because I think ultimately, and this might go over people's heads, but I think ultimately, because we all have, like I said before, sin, the root of all sin lies in human heart. It's easy to sell to your concupiscence, your appetite for not good things. Do you know what I mean? And I can sell that like hotcakes.
With
Easy.
predisposition to go to that place.
Yeah. So who's preaching the antidote to that? Like, where's the antidote to self-satisfaction in the now? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, we need a ward, like some form of buffer or protection from the worship of self. Like, I am the end of everyone else's sacrifice. It's like, doesn't feel right.
No,
Yeah.
it's
And
satanic.
it doesn't fit with anything else.
No.
Like, how can you be the end of everything?
Yeah.
And have a family or love anyone?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, see, that's what doesn't make sense to me, because I look at, like, for example, new atheists, for example, what they've done to like Christian worlds and what is now happening to those Christian worlds. Like, you look at the UK, for example, like they are destroyed. Now just look at it and go, all right, well, once they divert from from what I feel is the way that they should be, look at the terrible things that they're doing. It doesn't make sense to me. So something went wrong. They tried to destroy the foundation of Christianity, and then just didn't replace it with anything good, just with the self.
Yeah, and so I think you're onto something there, and you know, there's some famous atheists that have come out and said multiple times, like, I'm a cultural Christian.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, and they've actually gone further than that, and they've said, if I have to choose between one religion and another, I hope Christianity wins.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that goes far enough, because they're only looking at, well, the only form of religion is like organized religion, but you have to have a priority system. So you have to have a what's most important. What am I doing everything for? And if that's not a religion, oh, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God. Well, guess what your highest priority is? It's you. You're worshiping yourself.
Yeah.
There's no way that you can be a spectator and not in the game. You're in the game. You've got skin in the game. You're on the pitch. You're refusing to play, you think, but you're just playing with yourself. You know what I mean? It's like,
Awesome.
yeah.
The last Sunday Mass, the sermon, it's called a sermon after the
Homily, yeah.
that Father Peter gave, which is it was just so perfect for timing in me in my life anyway. Because
Awesome.
The NASA one?
yes, the NASA one.
Nice. I've heard about this. Good.
So even like maybe a month or two ago, I called up Matty. We linked up because I want to talk to him more about what the purpose of life is, because I wasn't lost, but I was definitely searching for the answer. I was desperate for it. And pretty much to wrap up the conversation Matty and I had was life's about love, which I mentioned earlier. And then coming to the sermon, I still had questions because I do overthink a lot of these things a lot. Go into that Mass, and then Father Peter tells a NASA story. You know, JF Kennedy goes to NASA when they're trying to put the man on the moon, and JF Kennedy goes up to the janitor and asks him what's his role in NASA, and he's like, to put a man on the moon.
Yeah.
A guy who just cleans the toilets, makes sure everything's spotless for everyone else to use, so they can then go back to their work and put a man on the moon. Like and that just like opened up my mind to the limits beyond what I thought possible. And I guess, and then he followed it through, just saying like we all have a purpose in our life, whether you're the garbage man who picks up all the bins, or you're the girl at the salon who cuts everyone's hair. Like we all have our purpose, and without if we didn't have one of those people, like if one person wasn't there for their purpose, like society would just come crumbling down. Really,
Yeah, beautiful.
And I absolutely love that homily. So shout out to Father Peter.
Yeah.
But that hit me too. That one line where he asked that janitor, it's just such a humble yet important statement.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like the smallest things matter in the big picture.
Yeah. He's not a proud idiot.
Yeah.
He's a humble and rightly esteemed man.
And it's so true. Like how important his role is, like how minor some people would
matters.
see it. Like for just people to go take a break, go to the restroom in a clean environment.
It's amazing.
Like you're just able to stay focused on your task. Like you're not going there like, oh, look at the smell, and you know, there's maybe stuff on the floor, and it just messes your mindset. And especially people working at NASA that have extreme flow states, like that can knock them out of their flow state instantly, and then puts them off task. And over a period of 5 years, that could delay the project by 3 months. So just the simple idea of having a clean toilet environment to do your business is just
just clean environment in general. Like that's just such a great message.
Yeah.
It's a small thing, but it's so important that everyone does that as well. Even for themselves, like for their home environment too.
This idea that everything knits together, St. Paul talks about it in his letter to the Corinthians, I think, about the body of Christ. He says we're all members in the body of Christ. And I was preaching on this the other day because it was the feast of a doctor of the church called Saint Hildegard of Bingen. And she's like a bit of a boss. Like she was a mystic. She had these visions. She kept a diary. She was into botany. She did like medicine. Just one of those like weird Renaissance types people who's like weirdly active in every discipline that there is. And yet, you know, it was her feast day, but it was also the feast day of Bishop Robert Bellarmine. And the church recommended that we celebrate him. whereas she's kind of like buried underneath. And I was like, well, what about her? Like, she's a boss. So I sat with her as an odd figure. And when I was preaching, the reading was Paul to the Corinthians, and he's like, the eye can't say to the foot, I have no need of you, because they do different jobs in the body. It all does different jobs. And I was thinking, like, we think of ourselves as members of a body, and I might estimate myself very extravagantly, or I might shrink and say, I'm not like, Saint Hildegard. She's like a big arm on the body of Christ. She can do so much and she's so powerful. I'm more like a hand. Actually, no, I'm not even like a hand. I'm like a finger. Actually, no, I'm not even like a finger. I'm like a fingernail. I'm just like this little itty bitty thing on the body of Christ. But think, if you stop for a second and you thought of literally the millions of ways you've used your fingernail in the past month, millions. You can scratch things without leaving a mark. You can scratch holes in things. You can like pluck a guitar string. You can do a million things with your fingernail. Then your hand, then your finger, which has all these operations, then your hand. I remember Mum and I were at Mitre 10 one time, or Home Hardware or whatever it was, and there were like all these poles in a barrel, and Mum said, we want, one that's this thickness and this weight and this whatever. And the guy sort of like just tentacled his hand in there, and he's like, that one? Oh no, this one? Well, how about that one? And I was watching his hand, and I was thinking, how does a hand do those movements? But his hand, animated by his mind, knows what to do. And it's like, however small you estimate yourself, the janitor in NASA, it's like, no, you're knitted into, the arm can't do anything without the tiny members anyway. Like, what's an arm without a hand? You know what I mean? It's being at home with who you are, where you are, with your gifts, and just being faithful. It's like, so what am I serving here? Who am I serving here?
And to take that a step further, you could look at the cells in the blood. You know what I mean? The immune system, etc. That's totally unseen, but it matters a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I actually want to go back to like kind of the message that we were talking about before. People can take that message and pervert it again. Go, oh well, that's just who you are. Oh, just keep doing your gross stuff.
Yeah.
Just keep doing that. That's just who you are.
How do you mean?
Like
let's all be fingernails.
What do you mean, like sin?
Like, if you can easily tell people, you can take that message of being who you are, just doing what you're meant to do, and use it in a way to go, oh well, I'm gonna be an OnlyFans model. That's who I am. That's who I feel like I should be.
Yeah,
but that's wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's probably there's a lot to say about that when it comes to the conscience. But I think that's unique about Christianity, is that we have revelation, and we have the body of Christ, which we would talk about, like the whole church going back through history and all of the knowledge that they've gained. I guess you could say wisdom is passed down, and there's just so much there. And we think about, if you bring it back to the history talk I was talking about before, and we say like, oh, today we know so much. General people can look at history and say, oh, people were kind of dumb back in the day, They didn't read and write very well, if you go back far enough, you know what I mean? They kind of didn't know nothing compared to what we know. We're so much brighter. But they did incredible things, and they always had the power of observation, and things really mattered. They couldn't get it wrong. They couldn't just muck around. Do you know what I mean? And they survived incredible odds, and not just survived, thrived. We have today what we have because of all of their sacrifice. And I think people write off the history so easily. So if you're going to look back at history and say, oh, they're all kind of silly, I know more than all of them, that's that self-worship, that pride coming out again. Whereas really you should be like, if you put me back at 100 AD, I don't know if I could do it. You know what I mean? But you can take that on a different realm and talk about, and this is the other way I was going to take it, is trust in society. As a business, we have to trust. The higher levels of trust, the better we all thrive. If no one trusts anyone, it's not a good community. And you can see even in this community, the levels of trust are lowering with time, which is unfortunate. And I don't think it's irreparable. But I remember when I was a kid, we've talked about this before, I think even on the last podcast I might have brought it up, but we could play anywhere, anytime with anyone. We could go to like a state development and play in dirt piles, and we
Yeah.
could go down the creek and we could do.
You don't see kids playing around anywhere anymore. They're at home playing video games because there's no trust in the community. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we don't know our neighbors. We
Yeah.
used to know all the neighbors.
Mm.
We would go, everyone's problems, we would try to help. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Even if we couldn't do much, just
What-
walk with them.
I feel like that's what mainstream media has unfortunately done to society is they just pump in every day,
Mm.
turn the TV and it's breaking news, youth crime,
Mm.
war, this,
Mm.
bad. And over time, like over a accumulation of 20 years, people just have lost trust in everything because everything's bad, crime's on the rise, and people just, because as a parent, you look after your children, like they're your priority and you want to keep them safe.
Mm.
So if you have this fear in your mind that there's kids going around at even just early hours of the evening or doing all these terrible things, like you're instantly going to want to keep them safe and keep them indoors, away from that danger.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny you bring that up. I actually want to touch on that. I find it really interesting when people look at all of those really grandiose problems and they use it for an excuse to go, oh, well, it's too far out of my hands. I'm not going to do anything.
Mm.
And when everybody does that, everybody's buggered. But you can just take a small bit of responsibility for your little space, and then you show how show other people how to do that, and then it's the entire community. Suddenly, Gladstone's doing great. Suddenly, Australia's doing great. Suddenly, the whole world's doing great just by every little person doing their thing. Like you were saying, be the fingernail and be not proud of it, but do your part.
Know it matters. Know
Yeah.
there's value to
Be
it.
faithful to what you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I just want to talk about like what you say about mainstream media. I'm just very cautious to blame, and especially blame outside, like others, because everyone has a choice. Two things. Everyone has the choice to watch the news.
Yep.
And the other thing is the news was on flat stick at my house when I was young. Like I can remember being 6 years old and dad would watch the news every single night. Like so would mum. And the news wasn't great. The news was like we all know at this day and age that danger is the highest priority. So bad news or dangerous news sells
Gotta
the
be the most
fastest.
popular.
Yeah. And I think that was kind of always known, at least from the news agencies. Do you know what I mean? So there was always negative things out and about, but they had a ward against it. Like there was other things that mattered too. Like, and I think you were touching on it before about, I forget what you were saying, but I thought that's a brilliant it's a brilliant perspective because it's focusing on the subtlety. The subtlety of things is what people miss now because everything's so loud and in your face and so.
You have to get the most extreme message in 5 seconds, or you're not interested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a multi-prong attack that we're up against in the culture, in the secular culture. There's so many layers to it. The first thing is, there's no such thing as God. Worship yourself. Who are you? Focus on yourself. And what's good for you? What are you getting out of it? That's a huge prong, huge weapon in the arsenal. I lost my track of thought. Sorry.
I actually I can take that somewhere. What do you think is a good sales pitch for a young person that isn't faith-based at the moment? Probably openly acknowledging that, oh God, it's a joke. What's a good sales pitch for someone like that?
There's a bunch. So what I would say is you want to focus on the long term, and marketing and media is trying to get you to focus on the short term.
Right.
And so are we. We're fully bought into that. How many people sit with their thoughts? We have to be busy all the time. Like if I've got 15 minutes, it's something like, let me consume something.
Yeah.
I'm going to eat something or watch something or talk to someone. I've got to be busy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. My brother's fiance walked up the stairs just the other day, and I was just sitting on the couch. Because I was at home. I got nothing to do, so I was just let me just chill and relax. She walked up the stairs like, "Are you all right?" Like she was so surprised. I was just sitting there doing nothing. Just chill.
Well, the ancients used to talk about leisure time, and it would not be anything like entertainment,
Right.
which is what we see. I've got free time. I need to be
Netflix.
entertained.
Yeah.
Give me entertainment now.
Yeah.
I've got a thirst. I've got a hunger. Feed me. Whereas leisure is more contemplative. Like you're thinking about where am I? Where am I going? what matters,
Yep.
you know, what's my purpose?
Mm.
Am I doing well? Like all of these kind of deeper questions and reflections. And
Mhm.
that's what elevates your conscience, which in the Christian faith we would say is the vicar of Christ.
Mhm, mhm.
But if you stay busy, hey, give me this video. Even for us, it's like, hey, work, man. Hey, I got to make more money. Let's go here. Let's go there. This person needs me. I've got a million problems to solve. If I stop, I'll go broke.
Yeah.
But there's so much value in the subtlety
Yeah.
in leisure time. Hey, stop, listen, think.
Yeah.
And some of us have issues with overthinking,
Mm.
and journaling can be painful because it slows your
Yeah.
thoughts
Mhm.
down.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I can
Yeah.
100% relate to that. When I journal, I wish I could just bloody 2 pages up, you know, in a second.
I knew you could.
100%. And what, in saying that, again, another conversation Atlas and I have had is talking about like we drive with no music when we drive now. So that's a beautiful time to be able to just think. And I feel like why there's so many so many people depressed, anxiety these days is because when you get in the cards, music, distraction. When you have 15 minutes, it's turn the TV on, quickly watch your Netflix show while you
Yeah.
got a chance. And nobody has that 15 minutes just to think
Yeah.
their thoughts through.
Spot on.
This is what I really like about this kind of dialogue is that it all just it's like poetry. It just keeps rhyming and it just all makes sense
Mm.
because it's going back to the janitor at NASA.
Mm.
It's all the little things. Everybody thinks it's one big thing that you have to do and then you're rich and then you're powerful, then you're happy. But it's every single little thing that you have to do.
Yeah.
And it all adds up. And you know, if I'm going to a listing presentation, I'm trying to win this business over 5 other agents, and I'm distracting myself with some loud music, I can't think. I get to the listing presentation not ready. I'm you know, blurping out whatever. I just can't even speak to the owner. I can't think about where I am, what I'm doing, what's my goal, how am I going to help this person. I can't even process that.
And I think one thing that James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits is about don't set goals, which is what everyone's been told to do these days, is have this goal, like the destination. Instead of having goals and just have the destination like the peak on the mountain, that's it. Create strategies that makes the journey enjoyable and focus on building a strategy. So even when you achieve the goal, you have this strategy you've worked on and you enjoy it anyway, and you just keep going then.
That's the enjoyable
So
part.
if you just set a goal, you get to the goal and you've put all these disciplines in place, but you get to the goal and you're like, oh, I made it. And that's it. And
Yeah. What comes to my mind when you say that is the strategies. It sounds like a good idea, but how do you set the strategies? Because I think what's deeper than that is narrative.
Mm.
What's the story?
what's your purpose?
Yeah, that's where it's going to go to, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So
yeah.
what's the story is, and this is the thing is
right?
we don't give importance or value enough to narrative. Obviously in the media they do massively, but it's so much bigger than that. It's your life. It's the human race. It's at least the community and the nation, or at the very minimum, it's the family. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like you can have a good strategy to be a bad person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or
yeah.
you can have a good strategy to an end that's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, you're going to get to a place where you're not fulfilled. You're not actually doing what you're meant to do.
Exactly.
And that's what I like to focus on with people is you know, when I'm talking to them, I want to know, well, where are you going to end up? You're going to be, oh, cool. You've got a couple more cars.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
But you just reminded me of you were saying before, how do I pitch it to the young people? What's a good sale? And I want to bring it back to that and what you're saying right now about strategy. I had a good strategy and I was sold this idea when I was young to, you know, work super hard and get ahead. And, you know, the ultimate Aussie dream was to own your own house. You know what I mean? That would be amazing. And it's so hard. And my parents went through 18% interest rates and it just crippled them. And I'm sure anyone else around at that time would have done it as well. So it was like, I never want that. It was an emotional attachment to it as well. So I had a strategy of like, well, how do I own my house? Like, I've got to get that done. That's the most important thing. And that was like my priority. And I had all these strategies in place and I took crazy sacrifices to get there, you know, 3 jobs at a time and like, just being a yes man in terms of like anyone that wanted to live with me could live with me because I needed to keep the rooms full because I needed to make a little bit of board so I
Damn,
could
you're
keep paying a little bit.
Pull me up, bro.
Yeah, man. I did all of that. And I paid my house off way before any of my friends. I don't want to say numbers, but I was quite young when I paid my house off.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, finally I got there, you know? And it's like, it was empty.
Mm.
It was like, okay, cool. That's one less bill I have per week. That's a good thing, but I don't want a house. I want a home. You can't have a home without people.
Mm.
And then that's a whole new can of worms. Well, how do you have that?
Mm.
What does the best home look like? How do you get there? That's a whole different road.
Yeah.
It took me like another 10 years to get that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's because I was on the wrong road with the wrong goal with a great strategy.
Mm.
It's not necessarily a bad goal. It wasn't I was trying to be a bad person. It was just a good that I wasn't putting the first things first,
Mm.
Yes. Yeah.
which would be God.
Yep. Can
Do you know what I mean?
I was reminded of the rich young man. I think it's in Luke's gospel, but it's one of these encounters with Jesus where this rich fellow runs up and Jesus is busy teaching and he runs up and he says, "Good master, what do I have to do to be saved? What do I have to do to inherit eternal life?" Did I tell you about this? I think I might have sent you a sound file on the day I preached it. But there's this cool thing where Jesus says, "You know the commandments," which is cool. Jesus often just says, refer to what I said back in the day. Because I taught it definitively.
cool, man.
Well, he does. He often says this.
That's so
Even when
cool.
Jesus battles with the devil in the desert, he's like, Moses said this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't even bother making up his own words because it's already, anyway, whatever. So this rich guy comes up. What do I have to do to inherit eternal life? Jesus says, you know the commandments. Honor your mother and father. Don't steal. Don't commit adultery. Don't, et cetera, et cetera. He says, yeah, I've done that since birth. What else do I have to do? And it says, because the man was eager to justify himself, Jesus said, if you want to be perfect, sell everything you own, give the money to the poor, and then follow me. Now notice, the guy said, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? As if God is like a big taxer. And it's like, hey, how do I pay you off
Right.
and make you happy? And then I'm free. How do I do that?
Yeah.
And Jesus says, did you follow the commandments? Yeah. What else do I have to do? Well, actually, what you're asking is wrong.
Mm.
If you want to be perfect, which is not what you asked, but if you want to be perfect, here's the road to it. And it will result in your union with me. That's the result. You cannot take what I have to give and leave because what I have to give
Right.
is myself,
Right.
right?
Whoa.
So the strategy, the reason I thought of that is like the strategy for Christianity is what we might call theosis. It's like union with God. Why do I want to be a moral person? Because you want to be one with God, not because you want to get God's tick of approval. Who cares about that? He ticked your approval when he created you. But you want a strategy that unifies your life with him. And not because you're secretly God, but because you are made for love with God. And God has made you with only that end in mind. And if anything gets in between that, get rid of it. Get rid of it because your whole life is off track.
That was bomb.
That was sick. Yeah. That was
I definitely want to say that I know strategies in that. I find them extremely useful because I need to be structured. That's just my mind, and I can't help it. I'm not going to be able to change it.
Me too, bro. Yeah.
It's who I am, and but what I've found is I'm still extremely very early on in my entrepreneurial career, and I've definitely found that over these past coming months, I'm definitely doing it more for the people I love. Like, what is my purpose? And it's more for others now, like my future family, future wife, my parents now. And when you create your purpose more for others, when you feel tired or you don't want to do something, and you tell yourself I'm doing it for them, and it's more than just you, like the amount of energy I find I'm able to harness and create, and then it's just given me so much more leverage.
Two things I want to say. I never meant to give the impression that a strategy is a bad thing.
Me neither.
But I mean, strategies should be subsidiary to the narrative,
Yes.
which should be in line with the gospel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I was saying, piggybacking off you, was theosis is the narrative.
Yeah. Exactly.
The strategy should end towards that.
Yeah.
Mm.
And the other thing that this is going to be pedantic, but it was just the words that you used where you were like, I need strategy. That's who I am. And I'm not good. Like, it was like this resilient, stubborn, kind of, I'm not changing. This is me. You know what I mean? And the root of that is pride. Do you know what I mean?
But look at you, man. You're a humble fella. You just accept it. Good.
But,
I have to take it on board.
Edit that out.
100%.
but that doesn't mean that having a strategy is bad. I'm not saying that like you're saying like strategies work for me. That could be great.
Yep.
Like it, but I just caution against the rebellious underneath it. Like, this is what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
I'm definitely aware of that. Like, that's one thing I'm trying to do is eliminate saying I in almost every situation.
I don't think you need to do that.
Yeah.
I actually know what you're talking about. Oh shit! I said.
It is known what you talk about.
It's known what
No, because
I've done the same kind of thing. Where I like to. I said it a lot just then, but the intention is to have the focus on the other people.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
the intention is to go, all right, well, let me inquire about Matty. Let me inquire about Ashwin. Not let me tell you about what I'm doing right now and why that's so important and you need to hear about what I'm doing. I know what you mean.
Well, I guess coming back to human nature again, like we're all narcissists to a degree. And we're all very self-absorbed. So as soon as, like you can have, I think the saying is you can become friends with pretty much anyone you want if you make them talk about themselves all day. Like they'll love you for it because they're just talking about themselves and everyone loves themselves. Well, people are very prideful anyway. The relationship you create with someone just by getting them to talk about themselves, like the ends they can go to.
Yeah, I agree. But I want to caution the language that you guys are using because it's in relationship with each other that there is good.
Yep.
So like you can let me talk about me, but then that's just me worshiping myself. It's our relationship with each other, our wives, our kids, our friends, the community, the faithful. You know what I mean? That builds us up. So I value what you think of me, and you have to be a person. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yes, you have to be. Yeah.
So I think and then the other part, and this is probably going way too deep for this conversation, but I'm cautious of you erasing yourself because it's like a Gnostic heresy.
Yep.
Yeah, see, this actually brings up something I wanted to talk about, and I haven't yet been able to articulate very well to anyone yet, but I'll attempt. I sometimes try to do something that might not necessarily be, like, because we need to attack the problem with where we're at, and so where I'm at, it's a strategy to be on the right path. Does that make sense? Like it might not make struggling here again.
You're right.
But it's a way to go, all right, well, I'm this egotistical person. So I'm going to do it this way to get me, even though like going full the other way is wrong. It's an exercise.
It's exercise, yeah.
Even though going full the other way is wrong, I'll land up somewhere here and that's where I need to be.
That's what we call ascetism. So it's like purposely cutting against your natural inclination.
Yes, that's right.
To find a even keel. But can I say something? I think it's Bonaventure who talks about the 4 degrees of love. And this is interesting because you end up oscillating between them. You can't quite stay at the top because we become frail and stuff like that. But I think it's either Bonaventure or Bernard of Clairvaux, I can't remember. And he says there's 4 degrees of love. The first one is love of self for one's own sake. And that's a very primal love. But that's the love that like an infant needs to have.
Right.
They need to cry as soon as they're hungry and then get fed, you know? So it's not evil. It's just immature and it belongs at a certain rung of existence. Then there's love of other for the sake of self, okay? So the kid loves the mom, respects the mom and dad, does what they say because it's for their good, you know? Good, but still not the highest good. But check it out. You would think that the third one is the highest good. It's love of other for the other's sake.
Right.
And you would think that that's number 4, but it's number 3 in Bernard's thinking. It's like, well, wait a minute. That sounds very good, doesn't it?
I'm so excited about number 4.
It sounds very good because it's other-oriented. There's not about the self. You've eradicated the I out of the conversation. No, because you are a gift to yourself and you have to steward yourself well. So the highest love in Bernard's thinking is love of self for the sake of the other. Love of self for the sake of God.
Interesting.
It's not egotistical. It's like, God, you gave me to myself. I need to respect what I am and steward it well to honor you.
So more so in an eternal sense.
Eternal and temporal.
Okay.
You know, why
Yeah.
am I gonna eat a nutritious meal today rather than get some garbage?
It fits with the gospel, with the parable where he's talking about the talents, the parable of talents.
Mm-hmm.
It's like never waste talent. You were
Mhm.
given this. If you were
Right.
given a lot, do everything you can with it. If you were given not much, do everything you can with it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
A simplified version for me to understand that even more is like hurt people.
Sure.
If you're not taken care of, if you're not healthy yourself, it's so easy to hurt everyone else.
Yep.
And you need to be healthy first, and then you get like you need to take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
So then you can
be
take
generous.
care of other.
Yep, yep,
That's
yep.
great.
Think of the
That's great.
dad who's like, I got to quit smoking, I got to get fit
Yeah.
so I can play with my kids
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
just be a boss dad.
Yeah, I see so many people my age, and it's one of the saddest things, especially for younger women, where they don't love themselves
Mhm.
and they just get so hurt.
Sure.
And yeah, it's really sad to see. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we have a lot of that thanks to atheist secularism.
Yes.
Because, like, how do you understand love? Like, in terms of that what you're saying, I don't know if you meant this, but I'm thinking that
I meant the better version of whatever you're saying.
Yeah, probably.
Prideful statement.
Don't be so competitive. No, but I'm talking about that girl that you're talking about that doesn't love herself.
Mm.
Was she loved by her father? Do you know what I mean? Because
It comes from somewhere.
if you're
Well, see, not necessarily. I actually disagree with that. That's a cause and effect idea, and it's not necessarily causal. Like, for example, if you don't get love from your father, it doesn't have to mean that you don't respect yourself.
Yeah,
Because-
sure.
And so it's a
hang
Yes,
on,
I believe-
you're
I
just talking
believe
about agency.
I believe it can create the opposite effect. That the child that gets neglected when they're growing up feels more the need to show love to their children. I think that's quite common.
Of course, both
that
you can go both ways.
it's common, but it's
Yeah.
not necessarily a direct cause and effect. Does
Yeah,
that
I
make
didn't mean
sense?
it. I didn't mean it directly.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So to articulate what I'm saying, I'm not making the case that if you weren't loved,
Mm.
you are hopeless
Right.
and you have no agency over your future.
Right.
I'm not making that case.
Yep.
No.
But what I'm saying is if we look at environment does have an impact,
Mhm.
and the ultimate thing from my perspective is love. So if and then how can you see love? Well, if not through the church, certainly through your family, and certainly when you're at your most vulnerable.
Mm.
So if that girl was loved and cherished and valued
Mhm.
in an embodied way,
Mm.
not purely intellectually, and she had many, many examples of what love is in her life,
Mhm.
and that she was loved not because of her achievements,
Yeah.
but because of
Yeah.
who
Innate.
she was.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
inherently, she was a child of God, and that was constantly modeled
Mm.
to her.
Yeah.
She could fall into not loving herself, but she would be much more buffered from
Mhm.
that.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Mhm.
You have to, as a father, you have to show them what like love is, and it's not a perversion. It's a beautiful thing.
How do you do that secularly?
Mm.
Good question.
And what I would say is,
You gotta steal.
yeah,
from the
you-
Christian.
Exactly. You
You do.
Yeah.
because let's talk about it. I think we swing the conversation and we point it back at the youth
Mm.
that say, oh, religion's silly, or even it's whatever. It's not worthwhile learning about. Well, let's start pointing out some of the assumptions that they make. Is human life valuable?
Mm.
And they would say, of course, right?
Where does that come from?
Why is it valuable?
Yeah.
Because it is. Okay. Why is a human more valuable? Is certain human, like, what's the reasoning? Is it
Mm.
because Atlas is valuable because he makes bank?
Mm.
Is that why he's valuable?
Yeah.
How
Yes.
about
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
like, think about and I think this is a real question, because
Absolutely.
if you have a child and they're not well, like they have some sort of disease or some deformation or some
Yep.
problem,
Mm.
are they still valuable?
Mm.
And most people's conscience should say yes.
Yes.
I
Infinitely.
would think.
Mm.
But I think some secular atheists would struggle with that.
Yes.
Yep.
And if they didn't struggle with that, I would say, well, what makes them valuable?
Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's actually taken a step further now where
Beautiful.
people largely say that Christianity it's not like this. People don't treat it as like, oh, I'll just let them do their thing. I'll just let them,
Live and let live.
live and let live. They're actually saying that, oh, Christianity is bad for us.
100%.
Like, oh, the Crusades,
Yeah.
Spanish Inquisition.
Salem witch trials.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, they tortured Galileo, whatever. They say it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so how do you attack that?
Yeah, I can go through those things if you
Yeah.
want. Like one at a time, we can do
Yeah.
them. There's a lot of misrepresentation of
Big time.
Christ.
Yeah.
So, I guess the Crusades is a particularly relevant one for today's day and age. And
Yeah.
what they do is they assume this is another assumption.
Mm.
Everyone's good, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone's good. No one
Right.
does anything bad. So if anyone gets anything bad done to them, they're already like whoever did the bad thing is the only perpetrator. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the Crusades followed so many attacks on Christian lands, just unjustified attack after attack after attack. They were like persecuted and wronged endlessly.
Mm.
And there has to be a point where you retaliate.
Mhm.
And we really struggle with that because we're like, but people wouldn't do that.
Mm.
Like the only religion that we're willing to attack is our own, like
Yeah.
our inherent
Yeah.
Christianity.
Yep.
You can say Australia's not Christian, but I beg to differ.
Yeah.
Like our justice system was built on the Bible.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Christianity is everywhere in Australia.
Yeah, well, it's certainly falling off in recent times,
Yes.
but that's our history.
Yeah.
And we would be so hesitant to criticize other religions, but those same people would be like
Yeah.
more than happy to criticize Christianity.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the subsidiary idea that's not spoken about is that power is evil
Yes.
and that Christianity has the power.
Yep, yep.
So
Right.
we're justified in throwing stones
Yep.
at the powerful,
Yep.
which is Christianity.
Mm.
But it's like, well, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, see,
Why are they quote unquote powerful?
Mm.
And is there a possibility that someone with power is not evil?
Yes.
I'm very
Superb.
curious to find out the reason as to why Islam, for example, is so largely it's like, oh no, they're just lovely people, but then Christians, nah, they're terrible people. Why is that? What is going on there? Because it's certainly
it's
a
the power thing.
narrative that's going on right now.
Yeah, so and that's kind of a good example of what I'm getting at is today's day and age. This is a sensitive subject, so you have to be careful.
Of course.
But today's day and age, we can't understand ideology.
Mm.
Like we don't think that's a thing. We just think we're all the same. Like everyone gets it. Everyone's normal. But ideologies are massively different.
Mm.
So if we talk about Muslims and Christians, there's a lot of things that we agree on.
Mm.
It's not
Absolutely.
like we're totally different.
Yeah.
But there are things that we are massively in disagreement with.
Mm.
Yeah.
So much so that we would have wars over it. Do you
Yes.
know what I mean? And there's things that the Muslims believe, and you got to be careful because there's different types of Muslims.
Yes, absolutely.
There's like the
There's
Sunnis
different
and the
types of Christians.
yeah, but there's the Sunnis and Shiites, which is like two full different sects of,
Yes.
of Islam, and then within them, there's obviously fundamentalists, etc., etc. But there is sections of Islam that we would call terrorist groups for good reason. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
There isn't a section of Christianity that I'm aware of that we would call terrorist groups.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep.
Because and look, now I'm going way beyond my realm of expertise.
Mhm.
But there is things that those fundamentalists, Islamists would quote to justify
Yes.
religious violence on an aggressive front, not on a defensive front. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Mm.
But the main thing that I want to find out is why are Christians so persecuted in comparison to other, like even Catholics? Like Catholics
Yeah.
specifically are attacked. So, but
I think-
Protestants, they're a bit better than Catholics.
Well, I think
Doesn't make
I think part of it is because Christianity actually has the capacity to govern reality, you know, like it has the capacity to integrate everything. And therefore it's a genuine threat. Like you can't have
Right.
your little kingdom alongside Christ's kingdom.
Right.
It's one or the other.
Right.
So that's bad, you know. If you want your little kingdom, Christianity's got to go out the door. That's like
I think that's a good point.
Mm.
But I think it also comes back to that the self, what we were talking about, because Christian values rub hard against the worship of the self, which is where the heart wants to go.
Mm.
So if I'm big business, you know what I mean? And I'm like, hey, I'm trying to sell, like I'm the OnlyFans owner. Am I supporting Christianity in my country? Well, I'm out of business if I do.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And that's
Yeah.
an extreme example of it. But there's also all the way back. It's like, well, what does Christianity preach? Well, we preach asceticism, go without, don't follow your desires. Well, there's a lot of businesses that sell to those desires.
Yeah.
So that's not good for business.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And then on a more personal level, it's, hey, you don't get what you want. What you want's not the most important thing.
Mm.
And people are like, I don't like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Like sometimes it's
Yeah.
that simple. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and we talked about the subtlety many, many times. It's not just that, but that plays a factor.
Mm.
And we talked about people make assumptions all the time that's like below their radar.
Mm.
They don't know they're making them.
Right.
But I guess why is Christianity hated? Why is Catholicism hated? I think it's power.
Would you say it's hated? Would you use that word?
Depends on who you're talking about. Some people, absolutely. You know, if you make it your business to diminish the faith, then I would say you hate it. Does that make sense? Like your goal in life is to fight against the faithful.
Mm.
I would say you hate it. Perhaps that's the wrong word, but that's what I mean.
I don't
Yeah.
think many people hate it in that way. I think many corporations, like you were saying, they have this other goal and Christianity is opposed to that goal. So they have to wipe out Christianity. Yeah.
That's fair. And that is certainly what I meant when I said that.
That's right. Yeah.
But then there's other people that are like the famous new atheists, like Richard Dawkins, Sam
Yeah.
Harris. They made it their business to destroy the faith to their best ability using scientific rationality to say, oh, it's silly because of A, B, C, D, E. And then they're like, oh, like you said before, it's gone. Oh, I wish it wasn't gone. Do you know what I mean?
I miss living in a Christian world.
Yeah. But the other thing is, I really think that hits the nail on the head is that people fight against power.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately comes down to a lack of trust
Yep.
in themselves
Wow.
because that's how they see the world through that perspective. Do you know what I mean?
Cool.
Like,
Yep.
it's like, I don't trust myself with power.
Right. I've
Therefore,
actually
No one should have power.
no one should have power because
Yeah.
they're all like me.
I've actually heard
That's
people
awesome.
say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
They say, "Oh, well, look, I've done bad things."
Mm-mm.
So how, like they
Yes.
they can't trust others because they do bad things.
Yeah. It
It's
makes
crazy.
I've done bad things and I'm a good person.
That's right. Yeah.
Can I say, like, the rupture of trust is a direct result of the fall as well.
Of
It's like
course.
trust between God and neighbor was ruined. And that's why the greatest commandment is love your God and your neighbor, because it's like reestablish the deep trust that's meant to be there. Relationship.
I think a lot of people get caught up that with trusting someone. Like, how far do you trust someone? Like, you don't have to tell them your whole life, like all your personal. You can
you do.
trust them with maybe your
Please go on.
well, it's like you can trust people with, say, your business, but doesn't mean you have to trust them with your family, like taking care of your kids and all that.
Yeah,
like
right.
that level of trust. Do you think? I don't think so. That you have to have that much trust. You can. There's like levels of trust you can have in people. I think.
I love you, Lachy. You're a really good guy. But I like that I know you a little bit better. Like I like you gravitate towards elitism and isolationism because you're like, look after your own, you know what I mean? Which is, it's a good for sure. But, you know, when it comes to trust, you have to exercise prudence.
I just don't think you can open up the floodgates.
No,
to,
of course not.
Think of
come on
prudence
in,
as a
like-
virtue
Yeah.
rather than a reluctance thing.
Yeah. So prudence, if you understand what I mean when I say to be prudent or to be prudential.
Maybe elaborate a little bit more. That's okay.
It's being a prude. No. So
Kinda.
there's the 7 virtues. 4 of them are the cardinal virtues, so they're available to any humanist kind of thinking. because they're just logic. And then the last three in Christianity are faith, hope, and love. So we won't talk about them right now. But justice, fortitude,
Faith, hope, and charity.
faith, hope, and charity. Faith, hope, and agape. Yeah, no, faith, hope, and charity. Justice, fortitude, temperance,
Prudence.
Prudence. Okay, so justice, according to each one, they're due. Temperance, everything in its right measure. Fortitude, doing the right thing even when it's hard.
Don't rush it because this is bomb.
Well, we're dropping on prudence. Like prudence is the one we want. And really, we should be reading it out of that catechism right there. Can I grab that?
Yeah, of course you
Go
can.
for it, yeah.
But essentially, prudence is like to be prudential is to kind of be wise. You know, like it's to do things at the right time in the right
Determine
measure.
whether or not it's right to do it right now.
Yes,
Right.
in the right measure. Do you know what I mean? Like, should I do it now?
Right.
And in what way should I do it? And you know what I mean?
Check it out. Virtue is habitual and firm dispositions to do the good, which means you practice it long enough to be able to do it. I'm not just kind to people when I'm fed and rested. If at the worst of times, at the best of times, I've stabilized a virtue to operate out of, no matter how uneven the ground is. A habitual firm disposition to do the good. Human virtues are stable dispositions of the intellect and the will and govern our acts, order our passions. So we don't get rid of our passions, but they're there ordered to serve the good as well. Like when I'm angry, that actually helps me be more just sometimes. And guide our conduct in accordance with reason and faith. They can be grouped around the four cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Prudence disposes the practical reason to discern in every circumstance our true good and to choose the right means of achieving it. I may as well give you the last three as well. Justice consists in a firm and constant will to give God and neighbor their due. Fortitude ensures firmness in difficulties and constancy in the pursuit of the good. Temperance moderates the attraction of the pleasures of the senses and provides balance in the use of created goods.
So to get to what you were saying about just open up the floodgates would be imprudent.
And intemperate.
Yeah. But so you shouldn't put hard barriers. I don't believe that would be prudent. Like, oh, I don't do this with anyone.
I don't
Type
think they
thing.
have to be fixed. They can
Yeah.
fluctuate.
Yeah.
But I feel like the trust I have in my brother compared to the dude I just met at the
course.
shopping center.
Of course. Trust is
The
earned.
same.
You know what I mean?
But what you're saying is it fluctuates according to prudence. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, why does it fluctuate?
And justice,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And justice, because of justice is you're giving people what they are owed.
That's right. That's right.
And if someone has earned your trust, then you owe them.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? To trust them.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's great.
But I would also say that charity, we're not talking about get anyone that you've met on the street to look after your kids. We're not talking about that. That would obviously be unjust and imprudent.
Mm.
But we
Well,
are
see, sorry to interrupt, but I think it is
Good.
important. I think it is important actually
To get a stranger to-
clarify
okay.
these things.
Yeah.
Clarify, because a lot of the assumptions other people are making now, they're not testing it. They
Mm.
think that is obvious.
Mm.
They think the way that they're living is obvious.
Mm.
Yep.
And so while it might be obvious to us, it's not necessarily obvious to everyone. So
Yeah.
it is actually very useful, I think, to
Mm.
clarify these things.
Yes, absolutely.
so I would say charity is a huge antidote to lack of trust
Mhm.
because you put yourself out there and you be vulnerable, because charity doesn't have to be money. It could be,
No.
and that's fantastic, right? I'm not,
Yeah, charity can be time.
charity can be a conversation. Charity can be opening up, trusting, and being vulnerable to share your story like you just did before on the microphone.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
That could be charity. It could be going, like for me with church, you see someone new at church, charity can be going and talking to that person so that they feel welcome
Mm.
and opening up, leading the conversation, because oftentimes, we don't know each other. We don't trust each other. Someone has to make the first move to gain trust.
Mhm,
Yep.
mhm.
The first time Lachy, like the first couple times that Lachy and I spoke to you, like after we went away, we were just like, wow, Matty's so charitable with his time.
Can I just add one more little thing in there? Remember how we were speaking about how power can be perceived as an evil? The reason you're able to extend yourself, and like it's obviously on the micro, but like you have a sense of being empowered in that community, and out of that power, you can reach out to someone who seems on the outer. And it's like, if you didn't have power, then who makes the first move? Someone has to
Right.
break themselves to do it.
I think we're changing topics, but that's
okay.
that's beautiful,
Mm.
and that's a big one. Is like what we were saying before about power. People assume power is evil, and therefore it's justified to attack it. And that's why Catholicism gets attacked, because they are consolidated power. And if you go back in history, their empire was, if you want to see it that way, it was absolutely massive. And they have like a head of the Catholic Church is one person. So it's very centralized power. So if just in that definition of it, people can be like, oh, that's so powerful. That's free reign. Throw everything you got at it. You can't be wrong.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Whereas the other Christian faiths, if you talk about Protestant or even Orthodox, you know, I love my Christian brothers, but the Orthodox Church is a little bit decentralized, and the Protestant Church is epically decentralized. So they certainly don't have as much power. And the other thing which talks about power is the Catholic Church takes the power from you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you have to give your will to God and the church in terms of the church's interpretation of scripture is final on certain matters. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the Protestant church allows you to interpret scripture how you see fit, and no one can tell you you're wrong because you potentially have the Holy Spirit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense that they do that.
yeah, I'm making a logical case.
Yeah.
So if I don't want to relinquish my power, I want to retain my power, it's much easier for me to go to a Protestant church because I still have the power to interpret scripture the way that I want to. Whereas if I go to the Catholic Church, I'm like, oh, that's really hard to believe, and that's going to make my life really challenging. I don't want to believe that. Well, on some things, you have to believe it. So I think for those two reasons, on a power front, the Catholic Church is free reign to attack, unfortunately.
You were just talking about a while ago, you referenced, I believe, Jordan Peterson. I don't like a lot of what he's talking about nowadays, but something that he does talk about is being powerless is a virtue nowadays. Being, that guy's lovely because he can't hurt a fly. No, the real virtue is being powerful, having the ability to do these things
and using it for the good.
Not doing using restraint.
That's temperance.
Yes, temperance. Yes,
which is a virtue. Yeah, he's spot on with that. And I think that's a good point.
Yep. Over to you.
Yeah, another thing I definitely want to talk about in this conversation is mass. Like, how was the mass structured? And just like the meaning of each section, from the reading the Bible to having the bread and the wine.
Awesome.
Can I pause?
Please go.
That's going to be massively on you.
Well, yeah, but please feed in.
I can talk about my own personal story a little bit.
Feed in. You're good.
But I'm happy to hand that over to you. But before we move on, you said something earlier, and I've been meaning to circle back to it, and I never got there. And you were talking about anxiety in the secular society. People get anxious. And I wanted to talk about something that you didn't touch on. I don't know if you remember the point that you made about why people would be anxious. If you don't remember.
Maybe something to do with the mainstream media.
Yes, that was it. That was it.
Well, actually, no, it was that. But like everyone's always distracting themselves today.
Yes, they're too busy.
Music, social media.
Yep. And what I wanted to talk about with anxiety, because I think that's extremely relevant topic, anxiety and depression, is I used to be anxious because, and one of my friends that I was recently talking to is still anxious for this same issue. We want to do good. Desperately, we want to do good. And we certainly don't want to wrong anyone. Some of us, you know what I mean? Most of us. But how do you know for certain, like rock solid, that what you did was good?
This is what brought me to my faith. I didn't have an answer for it.
Yeah.
I couldn't answer it. And for people that are part of the secular culture, they find reasons to diminish the value of others so that they can do wrong. Like children, for example, they call babies in the womb fetuses.
Oh man, don't start that.
Yeah, it's a huge topic. but
I'm very passionate about that.
me too. They find ways to label them a certain way so that they are like, oh, well, no, it's justified in getting rid of this thing because it's just this random parasite. They use this terminology. I know.
Gross, hey?
It's the most disgusting thing. They use this terminology and they bring down the humanity of others to be able to do the wrong thing. It's not necessarily
They're justifying it.
Yeah.
Why this is okay.
That's right. It's not necessarily, and it's something that I had to grapple with was that it's not necessarily that these people are like, they're intentionally going, no, I'm going to do this bad thing. They just trick themselves.
It's the warping of the conscience.
That's right.
Yeah.
Others
The warping
trick
of the
them.
conscience.
Yes.
That's such a good thing. Spot
Such a
on.
bad
And just, yeah, exactly. But such a good way to put it, an accurate description. What you just said really quickly, you mentioned it's a parasite. Just so we can clear that up once and for all. There's no such thing as a parasite being parasitical to the same species.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly
Do
right.
you know
yeah.
what I mean?
Nice.
You're absolutely right. A parasite is not the same species. But they try to use this terminology.
I know.
It's semantics.
It's
all-
insane.
And it's so easily dismissed if you had a conversation with someone without them losing the plot. Like if they're calm and rational, you can reach that conclusion.
Absolutely.
But talking about that, going back to knowing what's right and wrong, if I'm anxious, and even before I'm anxious, I just want to do good. And I'm reflecting on the day as we all do, either at 3 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes we'll wake up and we'll think about the day ahead or think about the day behind. Certainly when we lay down to go to sleep, we might think about, well, how did I do today? Do you know what I mean? Or should I have done something better? Did I forget something? If you don't have an answer to, oh, I did this and that was right, or I did this and I'm not sure if that was right or wrong. Hopefully they seen it the right way. You're very anxious because you don't have control of what morality is. Like you don't have a bedrock place that you can say, well, if they interpreted it differently, hopefully I can help them to understand what's correct. You can only say, if they interpret it differently, then I'm a bad person and I've wronged them. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
because if morality is essentially whatever you think and whatever I think, it's just your opinion, my opinion. Your parents taught you A, my parents taught me B, or my school experience taught me A, your school experience taught you B, whatever it is, we have no way of knowing what's right. And then it is a power move. It's like, you're right because you have more power,
That's right. Yeah.
which seems unfair.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And because that's unfair, I want to fight against power,
Yes.
which is where we were going before.
Living as someone that wants to do good in a world where morality doesn't
unsure.
exist,
Yes.
Well-
who knows what it is, that is a very stressful thing.
Yeah. Well, you know what people say now, and I've looked into this a little bit. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I do try to keep up with some of the leading thinkers on what they would call secular humanism, which is trying to understand morality outside of religion, I guess, or outside of a bit concrete context. Secular humanists basically boil down morality to that makes me feel icky.
Right. Right.
Like that must be bad because it makes me feel icky.
I've heard an example of this with, I believe it was chimps, where they'll give them both the good, let's say bananas, and then they'll give them like a food that they don't like, a grape, one to him and a banana to him, and then that guy will freak out like, that's not fair. Oh, well then, morality, they clearly have a sense of justice, so it's not to do with, that's, I have a problem with that, but I can't even understand exactly why I have a problem with that.
Yeah. But that's just basic desire.
Yeah.
Like that. I don't think I get what you're saying, but
It's not a very good argument.
no, it's not a strong argument. But what I'm trying to say is the secular humanists, if you take on board their premise that morality is essentially whatever makes me feel bad or whatever makes me feel go, ew, that's wrong. That's what they boil it down to, which to me is just,
Crazy
it's a
weak.
call to conscience, but it's a call to whose conscience?
Yeah.
And who's right and wrong? And then how do you enforce that if we disagree?
Yep.
Because we all disagree about what's right and wrong. You just brought up a
Yes.
really hot topic about
Abortion.
abortion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we all disagree about what's right and wrong. How do we know what is right
Yeah. Who is right?
rather than
Yep.
like
Whose
Who-
ick
who's got the biggest team.
Yeah.
Because right now
Mm.
we're literally in some countries we're fighting that battle against abortion all the time, and it's like who's got the most political power wins.
That's right.
Yep.
So the problem with that is you will definitely create anxiety because you're constantly trying to be with the in crowd, and everyone's morality, you can see it clear as day in recent times. What was good and bad 40 years ago is very different today.
Yeah.
So it's constantly changing. You have to go with the season. Oh, this is right now, and oh no, now that's right. You're constantly unsure. So how can you say, like, categorically, I did good yesterday? Do you know what I mean? You can't.
Well, in a way that I've heard it kind of explained to me from just regular people is that they've, they don't say that they're religious. They don't say that they're Catholic. They don't say that they're Christian. They might come from a Catholic background. They say that they're spiritual because they look at the church as a negative, and they still need something to do. Because most of these things, a lot of these secular problems, a lot of people actually don't, it doesn't sit right with them and it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
But then so many people have tried to destroy the church, but we still need something as a qualifier to,
to say I'm spiritual is like a big cop out.
Mm.
It's a big cop out because all you're doing is naming something ingredient to your humanhood. It's like, yeah, we know you're spiritual.
Right.
What about it?
We are spiritual.
Yeah. What about that?
My personal experience with religion is, and I was talking to Matty about this, is coming through high school is when I was first exposed to Christianity, really. Like my mum's side, they're Christian, but we weren't really raised in a Christian household. Definitely Christian morals and like how we were raised, like how we treat people. But I was first really exposed to God and religion at Chanel in grade 7. And I was still figuring out like what this is. I was very confused about it. And probably grade 10, I started like, we have masses and I'm starting to get more involved in singing and
Wow.
all that. And
You didn't tell me that.
I think I did. Maybe not. When I know.
I know.
But eventually, obviously, went to church last year, and that's when my journey really exploded. But what I'm finding now is because I'm extremely passionate about being Catholic, and I'm just out there. Like I'll tell people I'm Catholic, and I feel like a lot of people shy away from saying that they're Catholic
Absolutely.
and they're religious.
That's a good point.
And it's crazy how many people come out of the woodworks when you're just out there like
When
I'm
you raise a
Catholic,
flag. Yep.
and people are like, and they just feel safe.
Yep.
To be able to talk about it.
Yep.
So I feel like that's what I'm finding. I'm finding that a lot of people believe in God. They're just scared in the society like Australia that is extremely
It's
atheist.
assumed that belief in God is stupid.
Yes, that's right.
And they just
Make sure
don't
you're
want to say
amongst
because
friends.
they don't want to be an outsider. But it's just like I said, it's crazy how many people come out the woodworks.
As
being just
Matty
like,
would often say,
I'm
you don't want to be
Catholic.
the fool.
Yeah.
You can't look like a fool.
Yeah. But you know what I want to say? I want to say, going back to the virtues, inside fortitude is courage. And we need to encourage our Christian brothers to not be ashamed of their faith.
Yeah.
Because it's the truth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
I know.
like you have the truth.
You shouldn't be shameful about the truth.
Yeah.
That's
No.
right.
And why I wanted to mention that, obviously, my journey in high school, like starting to figure it out, is because, like I said to you, Matty, that I thought it wasn't cool to be spiritual. That's how I felt in school. It wasn't cool to talk to, like, I believe in this guy called God. Felt like I would be shamed for it. That's how I felt.
Of course you
As a
would be.
young
You
man.
were right. You were right to think you would be shamed for it.
Yep.
You would have been shamed for it. You probably still would be by certain circles. Do you know what I mean? But just because somebody thinks something is shameful doesn't make it shameful.
Yeah.
Which goes back to what we were talking about before about morality. Do you know what I mean?
I'd also say it's hard to tell how long you would have been shamed for it because I was openly religious in my school, and it was the same culture that you were in, and my friends knew it, and they were happy to accept. But that's just who I am. Like, it was a very relativistic acceptance. It's not like they said, yeah, he's got the truth, but they're like, yeah, Ashwin, he's Catholic, good for him.
But were you in the coolest team? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't
The
think so.
cool kids can't do that because, and this goes back to what we were saying before, the coolest kids, what makes them cool is they're like leaders and they do their own thing and their expression of individuality and their power. And you're very limited. If you're a Catholic, you're not limited, I guess is not the right way to say it, but you kind of have to obey certain rules that the cool kids don't
It's
have
funny,
to
like
obey.
what justifies cool kids too? Like I don't get
My
it. Like,
mum
it's
said I was
funny.
cool.
I say you're cool.
That's a funny age because it's a thing. Like at high school, there's the cool kids bunch in every grade, and that's what I was trying to figure out. Like, what makes them so cool?
Mm.
Like, is it because they're like they are against society and they're
Yeah,
like
yeah.
kind of seen these like
It's a
rebels?
facade.
They're seen as rebels in a way. Is that what makes them cool?
I think it's multifaceted. I think it's
I think
they're
it's being tall, good looking. No, I was just
Rich.
called named Atlas.
Yeah,
You got to have a cool name. You know what I mean? No.
What's your last name?
Corrin.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
No,
Just
but
came earlier.
yeah, it's multifaceted. It is those things you said. You know, if you're attractive, that does partially make you cool. If you're wealthy, that does partially make you cool. If you're charismatic, you know,
Would you say it'd be something? It's something that a lot of people lack. That people lack. If you lack what that person has, that's seen as valuable, does that make them cool?
yeah,
Would you
yeah,
say?
kind of.
Because that's
like,
what you're pretty much listing off like attractive.
yeah,
You
yeah.
would say a lot of people would see themselves as non-attractive,
yourself,
and they see
yeah.
this. They're like, "Oh, I wish I was that guy."
Yeah,
Their
it
money,
could be,
like,
yeah. But it is valuable to be attractive. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there is a value in beauty.
Yep.
100%.
And there is value, I think, to a degree. Maybe I'm wrong here, but in power.
Oh
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And in that sense, like we said before, the Catholic faith will empower you in certain ways, but you have to give your will to God.
Yeah, which is a
You
radical
can't-
disempowerment.
You can't
Mm,
say,
mm, mm.
well, I mean, sure, you can. We all certainly still sin, but you can't be in good conscience and say, I'm going to go and commit multiple sins publicly and follow me, guys.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
It breaks down. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
It's disempowerment in the positive way. It's giving your will to God. It's not a bad thing.
boom. And
Beautiful.
that's perfect. And that's the segue to the secular idea of freedom versus the classical, or I guess you could say Catholic, but it's actually much bigger than the Catholic example of freedom.
Yeah.
Which is
Willing the good. Being able to will the good.
willing the good. You're not free to choose infinite amounts of things. You're free to choose the good and do the good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the only the person that has to do the good thing is not good. It's not a good person. The person that can do something else but chooses to do the good thing.
But
That's
who has to do the good?
Yeah.
the focus is on the freedom to be able to do the good thing. You can't be good if you're made purely to do good and not anything else.
If you're literally shackled, yeah.
yes,
But
yeah.
but you can't do evil that way either.
That's right.
You
That's
have
right.
no choice.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
have
You
no
have
agency.
no virtue there. There's nothing of value there when you can't
Yeah.
do something else.
So this takes us back to Adam in the garden. It's like
Right.
Adam and Eve, you got everything. Don't do that one thing. And then God seems to evade them, so that they have the illusion of not having him over their shoulders. Now what do? Because they're meant to exercise their freedom as an expression of love, and they don't do that.
But just to be clear, everyone has free will. So no one, like in reality, if we're not talking hypothetical, in reality, everyone should be free to choose to do the good.
Yep.
Is that what you mean? Or do you mean like some people are actually shackled and they have to do the good?
What I mean is, like, let's say you have an example of a man where his family's being taken from him, having the ability to or actually, no, that's a bad example. Let's say there's a man, something's being stolen from him, and he has the ability to do the right thing, and he does the right thing. That's much better than the person that doesn't have the ability in the first place and can't do anything. That's not a perfect example.
Oh yeah,
actually,
I think
sorry.
you were I get what you're saying. I think
Yeah.
you were talking about the Jordan Peterson thing.
That's right.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
You
now.
need the ability to do good.
Yeah, of course.
For it to be good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
But I took
Yeah.
that the wrong way. But anyway, sorry, where did we start that?
You went segue to secular / Christian freedom.
Oh yeah, of
Or-
course, yeah.
Not Christian, but a good anthropological freedom.
And I think you touched on it before. It's about putting freedom above the good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more important that I'm free. Therefore, I can abuse every other good
Yeah,
to exercise my freedom.
yeah.
It's like,
Exactly.
Mm-mm.
You can go on with the mass now. I made my case.
Well, 100%. Do you want to kick it off? The mass, like how did it come to be, and like
Well, the guy named Jesus. So what is the mass? Do you have what's your sense? What's your cursory sense of what the mass is? What would you say, having tiptoed into it?
well, I guess I say the church is the place of it's a place where you can connect to God.
Good.
It's like the
church itself.
The church itself
the
is
building?
where you can be in the presence of God at the highest.
Good at the highest. I like that.
Yep.
Because I could rightly, and I'm going to get to the mass in a second, but I could rightly say God's everywhere. So
Yes.
and God is everywhere. So why go to a church? Why not go to the beach? Why not go to the park? Why not go to my inner room where Jesus even said to go? He said, when you pray, don't pray out in the market square. Go to your inner room where no one can see, and then your Heavenly Father will see. So the church is what we would call a consecrated place. It's set aside. Consecrated simply means here's something that once had a use, but it now belongs to a different use. It belongs to a sacred use, consecrated. Sacra is holy. In the same way that, like, if I have a chalice, like a beautiful chalice that I would use at Mass for the wine, how incoherent and offensive would it be if I randomly took that chalice and made my morning coffee with it and drank it out there while I'm just, reading the newspaper? And how scandalous and odd would it be to take my coffee mug and take it on the altar and try and celebrate Mass with it?
Yeah.
Because it's consecrated.
Yeah.
Or it's not consecrated. It's like, no, that doesn't belong to that sacred scene.
Yeah,
Okay.
we spoke about this before, where you actually you could
In theory.
go to Mass with jeans on.
Yeah,
You could do it.
I could.
Should you? No, not necessarily.
I just got to cover it with my arm. That's all. Anyway, we're talking about, so we're inching our way into the Mass, but I started by saying, what is it? What's a cursory look at it? And Lachy was saying the church is a place with a heightened experience of God. Like, God is more profoundly, intensely
present,
there.
yeah.
Which is awesome, because God can do that. God is everywhere, but God can say, wait a minute, I want you to not just vaguely be in my presence, but I want you to make eye contact with me. I want you to look at me. That's why when we go into a church, which is a consecrated space, it's like there's layers of consecration within the church itself. You walk into the church, what's the first thing you do? Quiz question number 1. What do you do as soon as you walk into the Catholic Church?
Genuflect.
Yeah, maybe renew your baptism in the baptismal font.
Yeah.
And then genuflect where? To the organ?
No.
To the back door?
No.
Where?
To the tabernacle.
To the tabernacle, because the church is an intensified presence of God within there. And then, and then inside the tabernacle, and there's a little red light to signal that someone's home, there's an even more intense, and actually the church would say the most intense sacramental presence of Jesus this side of heaven is in that little tent. That's what the tabernacle means. Okay. And it's like, okay, so how did that get there? Well, it's the celebration of the Mass. So the church has sacraments, okay? Sacraments are public, concrete events where God is made tangibly, experientially, and efficaciously present. Like, the sacraments do something. And of course, you need faith to interact with them. But that it's not your faith that makes it real. It's your faith that accesses the reality. It is real, Yeah. Okay, so I'm getting to the Mass, but the 7 sacraments are baptism and confirmation. I'm going to skip this one. Baptism, I'll just say Eucharist. Those are the sacraments of initiation. So when you guys finish your RCIA, that's what you'll be doing. Sacraments of healing, anointing of the sick, and confession or penance. And then the sacraments of mission or service is the priesthood and matrimony, marriage. Okay, so they all sort of knit together, like the baptized come to the celebration of the Eucharist. The confirmed, the chrismated, they're all claimed by Christ. They're coming together as body of Christ. The priest himself is obviously a baptized person. He's been anointed with the oil of chrism. Like, the sacraments are just absolutely overlapping in every direction, everywhere. So we come to the Mass. Okay, what is the Mass? The Mass is an obligatory coming to the cross of Christ where salvation streamed forth. It's a representation of the sacrificial offering of Jesus. When we say representation, because some Christian brothers and sisters stumble over this, it's not it's not that Jesus is sacrificing himself again in real time, because that would be nonsense. That would be the most nonsensical thing that there is. But that's what we get told that we're doing. We're oh, why is the priest sacrificing Jesus again? No. Jesus, the one priest at the one altar, offers the one sacrifice definitively for all time and space. And at Mass, we retrace back there and we go back to that eternal moment and we honor it, because at that moment, everything changed, right? With me so far?
I am.
Good. So when we come to Mass, we come as sinners in need of redemption, come as sinners to just be washed in the blood of the Lamb again. Like, when I say again, I mean because it's a new day in our journey, but like it happens once definitively. Okay. What's the central symbol? What if you could break the Mass into two parts? What is it? There's two liturgies, and liturgies means public official celebration of the church. So, we can pray again. It's like a consecrated thing, so I can pray at any moment I want. But when I gather for the liturgy of the church, the whole church is gathered. Like, you might say, no, there's only like 12 people in your bobo. It doesn't matter. The whole mystical body of Christ, the Christians in Alaska, the Catholics in Mexico, they're all mystically there. Those who've gone before us, the saints, they're all mystically there, because there's one thing happening. Yeah? There's one thing happening. Okay. So we gather, and then the liturgy is in two parts: the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the Eucharist. What is the liturgy of the Word? Well, you can read it in the book of Acts. Ever since the Christians first started gathering, they would read from the Old Testament. They would read the Hebrew story, the story of the Jews, the narrative, and they'd sort of position themselves on pilgrimage. It's like, yeah, we know where we've been. We know who God is and what God's doing. And we are putting our roots deeper into that story, because that's our story. And I mean, the New Testament wasn't written yet, but they would share their own correspondence and preaching and stuff, which has become, the letters of Paul and the New Testament, which we also read from. So the liturgy of the Word, day after day, Sunday after Sunday, immerses the Christian in his or her story of salvation, the story of God's people, God and God's people, right? Which is why in 2024, we're still hearing about random stuff in Leviticus. Oh yeah, Moses, did such and such. It's like, who cares? We're in Glasgow in 2024. Well, no, it matters, because this is the same story. The same story, okay? I'll say one more thing about the liturgy of the Word, and please interject, because I'm going to get bored of my own voice if you don't. But the lectionary, right? The way that the Word is parceled out to the people of God at Mass, the lectionary is like a kind of work of genius. We don't just take a Bible to Mass and say, hey, Lucky Dip, what do we read today? A pilgrimage has been dissected so that the lectionary is a Sunday lectionary at least is a 3-year pilgrimage into the mysteries of the faith, right? So it's not like January 1st we start at Genesis 1:1, and then by December December 31st, we end in last chapter of Revelation. It's not Bible study. Do that later. You're making a pilgrimage via the Word into the mysteries of God, which is why we have seasons, right? So at the moment we're in ordinary time. You go to Mass, Father Peter's wearing green. Pretty soon he'll be wearing violet, because they'll be preparing for Christmas. Pretty soon he'll be wearing white, because it will be Christmas. There's this like sensible seasonal movement going on, and it just keeps drilling deeper and deeper in. It's not like once you've been to Christmas once, you're like, yeah, I got that bit. No, you're going to come deeper next year and next year and next year and next year, because these are infinitely deep mysteries, and God is at the bottom of it, and God is at the top of it. And you're being immersed into God via the Word, right? Via the Word, via how the Word has been organized. Does that make sense? Good. So you go to Mass, you hear the Word. On a Sunday, the presider is obliged, or the presider is obliged to break open the Word, to preach, right? So Father Peter gave that beautiful homily on the NASA janitor, and it made sense in the context of the readings you heard. And I can't remember what they were, but it would have been something about, following your mission, doing your bit. It all matters. Be humble. Purpose.
Everyone has a purpose.
Lovely. Yeah. Okay. So that's the liturgy of the Word. Readings, from Old Testament, Psalm, Epistle, one of Paul's letters or Peter's letters or James or something. It's James at the moment, and then the Gospel. That recipe of the word is always going to be there on a Sunday. Before you hear the word, we would have professed the Gloria, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of goodwill. It's what the angels sang when Jesus was born. It's like it's the song of the Christian. Glory to God in the highest, and peace to all of us. Reestablishment of trust.
Peace to people of goodwill.
Good. Peace to people. Peace to people with temperance and fortitude, who are seeking the good. They know how to exercise their freedom. Yeah, good.
So I just say that because
please.
that hit me hard.
It's important.
When I first started to come to Mass.
Good.
I was like, oh, it's not just peace to all.
Well,
It's
that's what I was about to ask. It's like, wouldn't we want peace with everyone, not to just people of goodwill? Like the people of goodwill already at peace in a sense.
What do they
Wouldn't
mean
we
by
be giving it
peace?
to those?
Well, that's
who,
interesting. No, you make a beautiful point, because what does it do if I affirm evil? Like if someone, it's one thing to wish them peace, but it's another thing to like, it's even more than condoning. You know, when Jesus cursed the fig tree, what was that about? That's a weird story. Jesus is this good guy who wants stuff to flourish, right? And just arbitrarily, it seems, he sees this fig tree and he's like, where's the figs? There are none. Well, die. And the next day it's dead. And it's like, yeah, if you're not bearing fruit, then the spirit is withdrawn from you. Like no peace for you. You know what I mean? And that's scary. But we do have responsibility here. It does matter. It does, because peace requires a response. So if you're not of goodwill, you can't even accept that gift. Jesus says this when he commissions his disciples to go on mission as well. He's like, you people go out in twos and stay in the house that you go to and wish them peace. And if they accept your peace, then good. If not, it'll return to you, which means they don't get it. They did not get it. And you leave. You take it with you. Anyway, awesome point. So you come to Mass as a sinner in need of mercy, and you say it literally every single Sunday. Lord, have mercy.
Yep.
Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. What is it? I confess to Almighty God and to you, my brothers and sisters, that I have greatly sinned in my thoughts and in my words, and what I've done and what I've failed to do through my fault. You could have the most saintly year, like just a flawless 10 out of 10 day a year, every single thing, and you'll come to the next Sunday Mass and you'll say, Lord, I'm still in need of mercy. I never don't need God's mercy. That's always the starting point for Mass. Always. Because that's how you open yourself up to God.
Well, I guess even Jesus was a sinner. Is that what they say?
Oh,
Or
no.
No.
Jesus wasn't.
But he would have modeled how we enter as sinner. But
Okay.
Jesus is not sinner
Okay.
at all. Yeah. And that's important. Yeah.
I don't mean to skip that point, but just to throw back to what we were talking about before, starting the Mass in that way is very humbling.
Yeah.
It puts you gives you a strong sense of humility.
Yep.
Which is the antidote to pride.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can never come to Mass and be like, I'm part of the elite who's meant to be here. No. If he were repentant, Hitler and any one of the sinners we might like to call to mind, if you come with repentance, then you got just as much right to be here repentantly and to try and enter into God's invitation, because why else did Jesus come? He came for sinners.
And that actually, I've actually spoken to some people, and that holds them out of the church. They're like, oh, I don't know if I can come because they wouldn't want me there.
Well, that's in the Bible. It talks about, there's a section of the Bible where, Jesus is giving to the men of bad, and then there's the people who've been supporting Jesus. It's like, Jesus is like, why are you giving to these bad men? Like, we've done so much good for you. What story is that? They do talk about it. I'm not sure if it's...
That's okay. Is it when they say he hangs out with tax collectors and prostitutes and whatnot?
Maybe. It might be that.
And Jesus says, it's not the well who need a physician, but the sick. I came to save the lost.
No, I think it talks about Jesus' prophets people who do good by Jesus all the time, yet Jesus' attention was going to the people who are doing bad.
Right.
And they were like, why? Like, we've followed you. Why are you giving these people your time and attention, not us? We've been following you the whole way.
Same thing.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. If he's got you, he's got you. Like, he needs to go get the ones he hasn't got.
Yeah.
The lost sheep.
The lost sheep. Beautiful.
It's the same as the like I've heard it articulated for the devil as well. Like if you're already in his power, he doesn't need to do anything with
Yeah,
you.
that's right. He's not going to bother.
He's going to
tormenting them.
go to the Christians.
Yeah.
He's going to go attack you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's press on, but after the liturgy of the word. Okay, so we've got mercy, need for mercy. Come a sinner, come humbly, not with pretense or whatever. Sing the Gloria. It's like my need for mercy immediately bursts into the most beautiful jubilation ever, because it's like, look who's merciful, the Almighty, ever living God. And then there's a collect, that kind of like gathers up. It's a prayer that situates you. It's like, loving God, something. Today, I don't know, I made up a really bad one, but like, listen for the first prayer after the Gloria at Mass, because it'll be something that positions you for the readings and everything. It positions you really well. It's a collect because it does what it says. It collects you for the mystery you're about to enter into. Then you got the liturgy of the word, the readings. Then you've got the prayers. You got a beautiful sermon like Father Peter's thing on the NASA guy. Then you got the prayers of the faithful, which is, now notice how dialogical the Mass is. It's not just a lecture. You don't just turn up and get spoken to the whole time. You come and we begin in the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Like this relational God gathers us.
It's participatory.
It's participatory. Confess our sin. Receive like a minor absolution. We say amen. Like it's very conversational. There's many verses going on, and there's many directions of dialogue. At one point, the priest speaks to the people, and they speak back. At another point, one of the people of God comes out and reads on God's behalf to the people. So it's like you're going to hear little Betty reading, Psalm 23, but that's God speaking to God's people in the voice of Betty. That's pretty humbling. What gives Betty the right? Well, she's a baptized Christian. She's got every right in the liturgy. And that's a definitive moment where God is speaking to God's people, so they better be listening. Then the priest breaks open the word, and he's doing it as priest. So he's doing it in persona Christi. He's Christ speaking to his people, which means, he better do it faithfully. Otherwise, it will scandalize the people that Christ would say something abhorrent, through his minister. Then there's the prayers of the faithful, which means the people of God, one of the people of God comes out again and petitions God on the behalf of everyone and says, loving God, for all the poor in our community, please help us be inspired to show charity to them. Lord, hear us. Lord, hear our prayer. And there's all these different prayers, right, which try and gather up some of the needs of local and universal church. And even the dead. We pray for the dead. Then we sit. Then we move into the liturgy of the Eucharist. What is the Eucharist?
It's the
Body of Christ.
Body and blood of Christ, yeah.
You're so competitive.
But he does get that point.
It's the body, blood, soul, and divinity.
Damn it. It's the body, blood, soul.
Okay. But yeah, all right. So that's what it is. But what does it look like? Does it look like a piece of human flesh?
Well, this is something that I have
Sometimes.
a question about because,
Sometimes.
like we've.
It does sometimes. Ask Father Robert Spitzer.
Yeah, I know.
It's something that I have a question about because, I think it's Protestants don't think that it's actually the body and blood of Christ.
Great.
And so what?
They, with respect, they have no idea of what is happening at the Mass.
Mhm.
With respect, all of this is missed. It really is.
Why is that?
Because some churches don't have a high sense of sacramentality. It's like, God's with us. We can pray to God. God will act. And that's kind of about it. Like, obviously, I'm being very crude. But for Catholics, there's a very tiered understanding of what God invites us into and how, right? So we have 7 sacraments, and they matter. And they're concrete, official means by which God has initiated a response from us.
And how did that come about? Just to be clear, why is that important?
They're instituted by Jesus.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
in the gospel.
So it's what he did. And so
Yeah.
that's why we do it.
The last,
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
Last Supper.
Right.
Yeah, the Last
Right.
Supper, yeah. He literally says in the Bible, like, this is my body
Yeah,
and this
do
is
it in
my
memory
blood.
of me.
Yeah, do it. And then there's people that are like, it's like, that doesn't seem right. You know what I mean? And it's like, Jesus doesn't say, what I mean is it's not actually my body and blood, mate. It's just symbolic.
Yeah,
Just do it. It doesn't say that.
No. If you read John chapter 6,
Mm.
it's like repetition in the Bible is a big thing. So if it says something twice, 3 times, 4 times, it's like, oh, this is clearly important. I don't know how many times he repeats, no, it is my body. You must chew it up and swallow it or you will have no life in you. He
Yeah.
repeats it like 7 times or something. It's very, very profound. And then people left and he let them leave rather than say, hey, don't leave. You want me to soften it for you? I'll soften it. They left and he was happy to let them leave. He was happy to let them go away.
So I guess what I would say is, on its face, it's really hard to accept that belief.
Mm.
Like, it doesn't look like blood and flesh. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
How did you make it divine blood and flesh? It's very difficult to believe that,
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
around that,
yeah.
right?
Well, 2,000 years later, how is it still his body and blood? Like how is it actually his body and blood?
Okay,
Just his
because
spirit, wouldn't it be? Like,
it's okay.
No.
No. So this is a good question because I'm going to backtrack a little bit and get to the symbolic importance of bread and wine, which is important. But what do we mean by real presence? And we mean it as literally as it sounds. But even the question of like real, like what, like how am I really present to you right now? Am I present to you because I got a heartbeat? Like what's the deepest reality of my presence
I
to you
guess
right
your
now?
physical
Mm.
presence.
Physical attention,
Yeah,
time.
yeah. That's cool.
Mm.
That's good. Because like when I used to talk to kids at the primary school, little kids,
Mm.
I'd say you can it comes back to the thing about consecration and like even within the church is intensified and then the tabernacle is intensified and then to consume the Eucharist is intensified. Like you can intensify the reality of an encounter, and that doesn't mean it was fake out here, but you've certainly pushed into the density of it. If I was to meet someone and I kind of wave at them across the road, that's an encounter, but it's quite vague. And then if I visit them, that's more. And then if I sit down, do a meal with them, that's more. And then if I happen to marry them and spend my life with them, that's more. Like you can intensify the reality of meeting with someone, you know? So what the church is saying is that in the Eucharist, Jesus has desired to give us, because he said, I'll be with you always. And it's a real promise. He doesn't say that in vain. He says, I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. He perpetuates his real presence with his church in the celebration of the Eucharist. Okay, so what does that mean? What does that mean?
Mm.
Are you familiar with the story of the road to the Emmaus?
Not really. No.
After the
Not really.
resurrection, okay, so Jesus has died, Jesus has risen.
Mm.
And it's the best thing in the world that he rose, but people don't quite get it for quite a long time. Like for 40 days, he has to keep appearing to them and debriefing what it means. And they're sort of in disbelief and whatever. So there's this encounter where 2 of his disciples are walking away from Jerusalem where it all happened, and they're walking to Emmaus. And they're walking and they're talking and they're pretty sad and they're disenchanted and whatever. And a stranger appears between them and says, what are you guys talking about? And it's Jesus, but he's hidden his presence from them, ironically. Presence, right? He's present, but not in a way that they can comprehend because he didn't want to. And he explains the scriptures to them as they're going to Emmaus, which is basically the liturgy of the word. They're talking about Moses and Genesis and Pharaoh and all of that. I don't know how many hours they walk, but they've basically had this gigantic liturgy of the word. And then it's evening and Jesus is about to, it's cool because he does this twice. The word that the scripture says is he made as though he was going to keep going. So like he didn't say, anyway, fellas, see ya. But essentially that's what he said. He's like, this is your stop. I'll keep going. And he does that twice in the Gospels that I know of. The other time is when they're in the boat. It's Peter in the boat, right? And they're getting tossed around and the boat's about to sink. And Jesus walks up to them. And then it says he made as though he was going to keep going. What a tease. It's like, anyway, fellas, take care. No, stay with us is the same thing that they both said. It's like, stay with us. So he does in the Emmaus story. He goes into the house, they break bread, and Jesus celebrates Mass. Like he basically, well, when I say he celebrates Mass, don't imagine like Father Peter in his vestments. And stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But it's a genuine presencing of himself in the breaking of bread. And it says when he broke the bread, he gave thanks for it, just like we do at the Mass. And when he broke it, they recognized him, and then he disappeared. and all there was bread. And it's like, was there anyone even with us? It's like, yeah. And he is still with you, and he is with you always. And the medium by which he means to do it is the Eucharistic bread, because of everything that it says and does. It's like very powerfully symbolic. But when we say it's symbolic, we don't mean it's not real.
Yeah, right.
That's the mistake of dichotomizing. Oh, it's symbolic, therefore it's not real. No, symbols are real.
Yes.
Oftentimes symbols are real. You know, when I hugged Matty when I saw him today, that was like a real symbol, communicated my real love for him.
The thing that I love, like you did it, and that's why I want to use it. You guys, I think, were there when you were there for Ash's last day as a priest here with us.
I believe so. Yeah.
He took all his vestments off and just laid them on the.
I was there.
And then he turned around in just his normal clothes and walked out. Like, that's a symbol.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? But he was really leaving that behind.
Interesting.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
So
that's
it's
actually
like-
quite a good analogy.
Yeah, and that hit me like
it really happened.
this Ash is way more across symbolism and symbolic things, and way more across the depth that they go to. And he talks the way he's been talking about mass. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, it's theologically deep.
Mm.
And when I first entered the faith, that would just be like, I'm trying to stay with you, man, but this is so hard to hold on to. But I slowly learned more and more and more. And then when he did that on the mass, it was like a symbol that was not really.
It was made up. It
wasn't
improvised.
liturgical.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't liturgical. Do you know what I mean? But it was so gut-wrenchingly true. Do you know what I mean? It was like, boos. It just hit me like that hard. I was like, it pulled me into like here and now and like made everything crystal clear for me. And it's like, in that same way, or even in a more profound way, Christ is present in the Eucharist. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. See, let me say one thing about symbols, and then I want to get into the bread and wine itself, because we don't just use anything. We use bread and wine for a reason, and we can't substitute them out for other stuff. So let me say one more little thing about symbols, and I want to cautionarily add, please understand that the church's teaching is that Jesus is as really present. He could not be more really present if he was literally standing there. He could not be more present.
Understood.
Yeah, that's the church's teaching. He is absolutely present in the Eucharist.
Can I just say one thing?
Please,
I
please.
don't want to put you off.
Not at all.
I know it's hard to believe that, and I struggled with it for a while. But just remember, you already accept that a man was God, died and was resurrected, walked the earth, and then was ascending to heaven.
I don't think that part's hard to believe when we were talking about, like, obviously Tiberius was the Roman emperor at the time when Jesus was crucified. There's only 10 doctrines on him and there's 40 on Jesus.
Yep.
So for me, that's not hard to wrap my head around, that this guy Jesus was real.
There's evidence for Jesus.
But we're talking much more than just Jesus was real. We're saying Jesus was God.
Right. He performed the miracles and he was healing the sick
And he was God.
Yeah.
He wasn't a magician.
Yes. Go back to the rich young man. He's not just borrowed some divine power and he's using it, because there were lots of miracle workers around Jesus' time. So it wasn't the most attention-grabbing thing to work miracles. Like, a lot of people did it.
And I guess what I'm saying is, if he died and was resurrected, that's a miracle. Do you know what I mean? There's no other, like, you're saying, oh, we believe it could have been his body and blood back then, but 2,000 years later, how could it be? Well, no one else is resurrecting today. When was the last time you heard, like, oh yeah, this guy come back to life, walked around as a dead man for 40 days and then ascended into heaven? Like, wouldn't you, if someone said that to me, I'd be like, what? Right? So what I'm saying is, how can you believe that happened back then, but then it's too much to believe that his is really present in the Eucharist? Do you know what I mean?
It's not necessarily that it's too much, especially in comparison to everything else. It's more so, what does it actually mean?
Yes.
Why does it mean that?
Yeah, good.
Why are we doing that?
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, I like that. And I'm glad you flagged that. And I'm glad you said that, because it can seem arbitrary that we've got his bread and his body and blood. It's like, what does that do for us, you know? So let me get to that. Because remember, the narrative for Christianity is what we would call theosis, trying to lean into the invitation to be made, to have communion. That's why we call it communion, to be made one with God. You don't lose yourself in, and it's not like you literally become like Lachy is God and Atlas is God. No, that's not the Christian thinking. You are knitted in the most seamless relationship with God as other. You are always other, and God is always other, because there is a relationship. There's like at least two persons going on. But yeah, it's you're being subsumed in loving union with God. Anyway, okay, so when I preached on Corpus Christi Sunday this year, just gone, it was one of my first homilies that I was proud of in Rocky, because preaching to people is hard. It's a vulnerable thing to do, and I had to
Proud?
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
yeah, thanks. Anyway, I took two angles with the Corpus Christi thing, because I know that you can be quite people can over intellectualize the sacraments, and suddenly it's not something divine anymore. It's just this like metaphorical poetic thing. It's like, no, that's a problem.
It's like showboating almost. Yeah.
Okay, so the two routes I took was dismantling the false dichotomy between symbols and reality. Okay, so imagine there's a little girl who comes home from school and she sees her mum, and she's like, "Hey, mum, I got you these. Here's a box of chocolates, and here's this origami rose I made you." And the mum's like, "What's that?" She's like, "Oh, I just made them because I love you." She's like, "Oh, these are just sweeties, honey. These are just sweeties. These are just symbols, honey. You know, like I don't really know what they mean. They're just symbols. How do I know you love me?" And the girl says, "Oh, well, maybe I can cook tonight. What do you want to eat? You know, I can cook, and then we can watch your favorite TV show." And the mum's like, "Oh, sweetie, those are just symbols as well. Like, how do I know you want to spend time with me? How do I know you want to do that stuff for me?" And then the kid gets really distressed and uses all her words and all her emotional display, and she runs up and hugs the mum. And the mum is unaffected, and she says, "Sweetie, these are all just symbolic displays. I don't have any idea what they're supposed to mean." And it's like, so the girl is not allowed to communicate anything. That's what's happened. The girl is not allowed to commune with her mum because any symbolic medium is unacceptable. It's like, why? Why is it unacceptable? Why does the mum have reason to doubt what the girl is meaning to say? Is there some reason the girl would be lying? You know what I mean? Or is there something intrinsically incoherent? Like, does a hug not mean I love you? Does a box of chocolates not mean I love you? So why is there a symbolic breakdown? And I would say the relationship is just ruined somehow. That's what's happened. Or the mum is a machine, is not a human. But analogous to the mass, it's like God is communing with his people, and he has chosen to commune by means of this symbol. And it's like, if you stop to think about it for half a second, it's clear what he's saying. And if you think about it for the rest of your life, it's even more clear what he's saying. And the question is, why do we have reason to doubt that he means that and those symbols are real? Why would we say, they're just symbols? I don't really know. I mean, I know God vaguely loves me, but I don't know what's going on there. No, stop for a second and position yourself as the mum with the little girl and be like, okay, God is saying and doing something to me right now via the sacraments. He's saying and doing something. And it's going to take the rest of my spiritual life to understand that, but I can literally lean deeper into it at every moment. Like, I'm leaning into the Eucharist now while I'm sitting around the table talking to you. You know what I mean? Okay, so symbol and reality is not a dichotomy. You know, like, yeah, there are symbols that aren't real, but there are symbols that are real. Like a hug from your friend is a real symbol, and it is a symbol, but it is real. Because imagine saying it's not symbolic. Yes, it is.
Of course, it's symbolic. Of course, it's real.
Everything is symbolic.
Yeah.
The word, like, what? Why do the noises I'm making have any meaning at all? They only have symbolic meaning.
What's the definition of symbolic or symbol, would you say? Was that too big
Well,
of a...
no, it's a representation.
Okay.
Like, blah, blah, blah. What did I just represent in the invisibleness of my mind so that the invisibleness of your mind can grab hold of it.
Mm.
I've just used words.
So it's representation.
Yes, yes. But my words are real. Like you have no reason to split my words from what I mean and to say, oh, that was the kind of just symbolic part. But what he really meant, what I really meant is encased in my
Right.
words,
Mm.
right? So the symbol is real. Is that enough? The symbol is real. Okay. Bread and wine. Okay. Why choose those symbols out of all of them? Tell me, where did bread come from? Can you just go out into the garden and pluck bread off a tree? Think of the massive network of stuff that Matty was talking about earlier.
It was grown.
All these millions of people at work so that I can have bread,
Yep.
right? So let's trace it back. Where does bread come from?
The ground, a seed,
Good,
a crop.
good.
It's harvested.
Yep,
It's
I'm
milled.
losing.
yep, it's milled. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have started at the end point, but that's okay. You've
Yeah.
gone to the ground, the
Yeah.
seed, it's harvested, it's milled.
Yeah.
What else?
Made into flour and
Made
then
into flour.
cooked,
Cooked.
added ingredients.
Yep.
Now it's bread.
Now it's bread. Beautiful. Now that was many seasons of work, and really the starting point was God saying, "Let there be light." Like God created something.
If you wanted to go that crazy, that's how far you could go with it.
Well, we want to
Where did
go.
bread
We
come
want to
from?
go that crazy because that's why bread is the symbol.
Yep.
Because it is the summation of the creative act fulfilled. That's
Fruit of the earth.
and
and
work of human
different- yeah,
hands. Fruit of the earth, work of human hands. God doesn't just say, "Hey, here's bread." He just doesn't do that.
Yeah.
He's like, "Let there be light." Now watch this. The seed has to die, or else it'll remain a single seed. But if it dies, it'll give much fruit. It's like every single thing is a parable on the way to it becoming bread. And the economy of the Christian life is that God invites us to co-labor with him. We're collaborators with God. He doesn't do everything for us, even though he could, and even though in a sense he does, because we borrow his gifts and stuff to do it. But he wants our participation. So he wants us to make bread out of the fruit of the earth.
Mhm.
Fruit of the earth, work of human hands. What do we bring to the altar? The gifts of God that we've been faithful with. The talents of God that I've been faithful with. I haven't buried them. I've sweated and I've bled and I've been injured. I've been ground up like the wheat in the mill. And I've been kneaded together into this other thing that I didn't even recognize. And then I've had to rest. And as I've rested, the dough's rised. And then I've been put in the oven. And that's like a hot, crazy process that's not very pleasant. And I've had to be there for duration as well. And it's like, far out. That bread is me. That is me. Before it comes to the altar, it's symbolic of me. I'm bringing myself to God, who I know I came from, right? Like God has given me to myself, and I've undergone this huge process called life, and then I've submitted myself back to God as the biggest gift I can make, except me on my own is a pretty small gift, really. It's the biggest gift I can make, but it's still not worthy of God. So at the altar, the priest receives all I have and all I am and says, God, you gave us this and we want to render it back to you because it belongs to you and justice demands that we do that. But so that it's a fitting gift, please receive it along with your son, who is the perfect gift, who is sufficient, but we want to be added to your son as a gift to the Father, right? That's what happens at the Mass. That's the communion. We become part of Jesus's filial offering to the Father. Like the Son is offering the Father something that is like the best thing ever. And we're kind of piggybacking off that gift and sharing in the exchange of it.
So let me just break it down for a second.
Yep.
So the body of Christ is the bread,
Mhm.
but the bread is also us.
Yeah, because there's a narrative.
We want to
There is.
go with Christ
Yep.
and offer ourselves up
Yep.
to God.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
And it's real and efficacious.
Interesting.
How
Yep.
good is that?
It's beautiful. And
Great.
I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot.
Yeah.
And the wine is the same thing. But like, how beautiful of a symbol is it that grapes, like for grapes to become wine, for wheat to become bread, it's got to undergo this like trauma. Yeah, it's got to die and just be ruined, you know?
Okay, so that's if you can receive the communion. Ones if you can't receive the communion,
Mhm.
which is a situation both Atlas and I in.
Yeah.
So how
So you're still being put on the altar.
Okay.
Yeah. Like when you go there faithfully are you baptized?
Yes.
Yeah. As a baptized Christian, you are the bread brought from the back of the church to the front of the church. Like you're like, yep, that's me in that pattern. I'm in there, God. Please receive me. Insofar as I can give myself, please receive me now.
Well, I'm not baptized.
That's okay.
So how does that
Have the intention anyway.
Right. It's the intention.
Well, it can't hurt to have that intention anyway. Because what are you wanting from Mass? Like, what are you wanting to do there? You want to worship God.
Yes.
You want to enter into the invitation He's given, and there's a sacramental barrier you can't cross yet.
So then what's the point of getting baptized? I still
to
think
enter into that.
Right.
When he says Ash is sometimes kind in the first place, when he says that's okay, you're not baptized.
I'm not saying don't get baptized.
Yeah, get baptized.
Yeah.
So when are you going to get baptized?
Well, see,
He's really good at that. You're a J type. I'm a P type.
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs.
yeah, INFJ or whatever.
Yeah.
I understand that you think we should get baptized.
Yeah.
But why is that?
For the same reasons that I'm talking about Eucharist,
Mm.
but I could be talking about baptism.
Mhm.
Have you read the gospel?
Not all.
You
No.
heard of our Lord
No.
and Savior Jesus Christ. If it's okay, let me segue to baptism in a moment because
Sure.
It's another sacrament.
it's another sacrament, and baptism is the doorway into the sacramental life.
Right.
So you cannot partake of communion unless you're baptized. You cannot
Mhm.
enter into that symbolic exchange,
Mhm.
and it's a real symbol.
Mhm.
So you will really be missing something
Mhm.
if you do not enter the doors of baptism.
So what I'm missing is the symbolic but real submitting to God.
What you are missing is the greatest gift God has to give us this side of heaven.
Right. Sure.
You're pretty much, when you baptize and you have your communion, you're pretty much fully engaged in God's.
Well, it's like, how deeply do I want to respond to God? Do I want to just be on the outskirts of somewhere and be like, hey, God, I'm in? God's like, do you know how to be more in? Because you can be, and that's what being in means. It means more, like always leaning more. Like the Christian life doesn't have a finishing line. It's just like a vacuum to be drawn into God.
Wouldn't the finishing line be heaven?
Yeah, but I mean, what's heaven? Like heaven isn't just something you experience when you're dead.
It's eternal. Is it finished?
Heaven is being like implanted in me at the Mass. Like Mass is heaven. Going to confession and having my
Interesting.
sins washed away is heaven.
Mm.
Like I leave confession in heaven. I leave as a heavenly man.
Well, I would say I leave in a state of grace.
Good. But I want you to know that heaven and purgatory, for that matter, and hell, for that matter, and Jordan Peterson talks about this. He's like, hey, we're tilting the world one way or the other. Like we're manifesting the hell that we're headed to right now, or we're manifesting the heaven we're headed to right now.
That's actually very interesting. Yes, I would certainly agree with that. We're
Yeah.
creating that environment here right now.
Yeah.
And so this is also something that actually got me into my faith in the first place, was that I looked at the world and went, all right, well, there's so much evil. There has to be good.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with there's people are creating hell on earth. So there must be an ability to create heaven on earth in some way.
Yeah, but it goes further than that.
It goes further than that. It's not just
Yeah.
a temporal thing.
Sure.
because
but-
because it matters beyond Earth.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, same as hell as well.
there's a lot to this. Like what we're talking about, Ash is exceptionally good, talented at being creative and theological, and it's a special thing that and we're kind of worlds apart in that way. We're kind of almost opposites in that way. And I struggle with this sort of stuff a lot. But if we go back to, and I don't mean to segue.
Please, no, go.
If I go back into where we were talking about before about the subtlety, and kind of like, I guess Ash would say the inner life, or talking about the inner life, what you were talking about, and I'd referred to about the conscience and the leisure time and the why are we here, where are we going, that sort of stuff. If you talk about the struggle to do good, it's not just the struggle to know good, which we've spoken about, which we can do with the Bible's help and revelation and the church, but it's the struggle to do good, because and this has happened, I can testify to this, I can know good and I can not do it.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So that points to something that is quite deep and very difficult to understand from a scientific only materialistic point of view. Does that make sense?
It's certainly difficult to. Yes. Yeah.
Well, how can like science can't prove consciousness right now,
Mhm.
and science is very strongly pointing towards there is no free will.
Yes.
So
That's right.
So
yeah.
you don't have agency at all.
Yes.
If you're
very
purely
deterministic, yes.
materialistic, if you're purely materialistic, you don't have agency. There's some people that argue about compatibilism and stuff like that. I don't think it's compelling at all at the moment, but most leading scientists, neuroscientists, etc., say there is no free will. As from a materialist, atheist perspective, secular perspective, what is the mechanism for free will? Is it these molecules going together? Is it this pattern of neurons?
Mm.
Where is it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's no known thing in the world that can give you the freedom of agency.
Mm.
And if there was, we could replicate it.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
then we could have AI
Yep.
that has free will.
Yep.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I certainly agree. I just
So then you've got that I think this is another one of these assumptions that we
Yep.
all just say, oh, it's common sense. We've got agency and free will.
Yep.
Where does that come from?
Yeah.
We'll find out one day. Will we?
Yeah.
right.
Science of the gaps.
That's faith.
Yeah.
That's faith. You know what I mean? We'll find out one day.
Yeah.
Okay. Rationally, where could that come from? And if we do find out, what will we do with it?
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep. It's a Tower of Babel type thing.
100%.
Yeah.
But so I guess what I'm getting at is if we accept free will, that's already a faith belief. Like it's a statement of faith. Do you know what I mean? And then you have to decide, well, where does that come from and how can you understand it? And you're constantly having this internal battle of how should you behave? What should you do? Not just in terms of priorities, but in terms of what's good and what's bad. And how do I overcome when I do know what's good? How do I overcome my desire to not do what's good? Or how do I prevent myself from doing evil? Or as the classics might say, you want to get a habit of virtue.
Yeah. The habitus.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like a strategy, you know what I mean? Of how do I become more virtuous?
Yep.
And well, I would say that's a deep question that would be fortified by the mass.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Right.
But you got to understand just where we are on the landscape. We are necessarily way beyond materialist thinking. So if you're trying to make sense of this from a very strict box-like block Tetris materialist perspective, you'll never get there. And if you and the thing is that you don't even live your life now as a materialist. I've never met a materialist that purely thinks in materialist terms. They always sneak beliefs in, faith beliefs in, whether they're aware of them or not. Some of them are, but many of them aren't. And I don't think that we can operate without, like, what's love from a materialist perspective? It doesn't make sense. What's a country? Like, these are important things.
I love how you're talking about, because I was thinking about this deeply. It's like, why is this material object valued in the first place? I guess it's only valued because people
Have
like
given
it.
it value.
It's only valued because of people. You know what I mean? So if no one liked it, it would have that material object would have no value at all. So to start with, what makes anything valuable comes back to people and love, I guess.
Yeah, and comes back to that inner life, that contemplative life that we all try to stay busy and away from.
Yep.
Because all of these questions are really difficult and they can be frustrating to sit with.
And terrifying.
Yeah.
Mm.
And people don't like that.
Yep.
So they're like, I'm busy.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I need to get away from this.
Yep.
But yeah, I just want to point like where we are is like this. Before we move on, you hinted before about people that didn't like the church, but they were still spiritual.
Yes.
And I think that's quite a large portion of
Yes.
the people.
A lot.
And what it points to for me is that there's a hunger, that there's an appetite
Yes.
for spirituality,
Yes.
but there's a distrust of the church.
Yep.
Where would there be an appetite for something that doesn't exist?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's a cool question. Like it when you say it, it's like, oh whoa, like that's awesome.
It doesn't need too much musing though. It's a clear answer. Like you have this appetite because there's something to be found.
I think a lot of people lost trust in the church because of previous events.
The
That
scandals.
they've just the scandals.
Yeah.
But you know, Ash, sorry, I'm going to call Ash
Do it.
out right now. Sorry, brother.
Do it.
When you were talking about, I forget what it was, a homily or something you did in Rocky, and you were like, you said you were proud of it, right?
Yeah.
And then you were like, oh, you were proud? And he said, yeah, thanks. Because that's a sore point for my brother. Do you know what I mean? He's a sinner as well. He's a priest that has done great virtuous things and will continue to do them, such as giving his life to the church and to Christ and forsaking his good of having his own family, etc., 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 which is massively virtuous. He still struggles with sin. And one of those sins is pride, just like you and I. He's still human. You know what I mean? So in saying that, while we would hope to hold our priests in extremely high regard and hold them to extreme standards, they will let us down.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But that doesn't disprove the church.
That's exactly the same thing that I've responded to a lot of people with is that they say, oh, well, you know, like Catholics say that the Pope is infallible, but then there's clearly some issues with some specific.
We don't say he's
popes.
morally infallible.
Or personally infallible.
Yeah.
So explain.
Yeah.
So the Pope is able, because of his office. Think of this: an umpire can make infallible decisions in the game. Why?
Right.
Because that's his office. That's why. That's his job.
All right. So
The game has to keep going, and we need an umpire. That's his job.
right. Okay. So to clarify even more, what does being infallible realistically look like as a pope? What does that actually mean?
It means in matters of faith, the teaching that the Pope makes officially ex cathedra from his papal position in service to the church is the church can run with. It's invaluable. The church can run with it.
Church can run with.
Let me say something,
Go
because
ahead.
I've looked into this recently,
please.
but I might be wrong. So
No,
feel
go.
free to correct
Go,
me.
go, go.
The Pope is absolutely not infallible in chill conversation about climate change with his mate, or you know, he's on a speaking tour, and it's not every word he says every day. He can never do a thing wrong.
No.
We're
It's
not
magic.
talking about that. No, we're saying that when he makes a decision to make a definition or a dogma or define something that is infallible from this point forward, this is what the church believes. When he does that in a particular way, that is infallible.
Right. So we're talking about a specific action that is
Yes.
different from other actions.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean right.
And it's also
okay.
rare because people hear, oh, infallible teaching, that means you can make up anything. When have infallible teachings happened? Do you know? There's been two. There's been two in the history.
Repeat the question. What was it?
So the Pope has made two seemingly,
Oh, was this
isolated
to do with the
infallible
Medicis?
teaching. Huh?
Was this to do with the Medici family or
no.
no?
I don't know what that is, but no.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe yes.
Yeah.
No. The two. Sorry, forget that. Scrap that. Okay. The two things were Mary's bodily assumption, that was papally defined. Yeah, we say Mary was assumed body and soul into heaven, and that was a belief in the church for centuries, since like the first century, second century. And then in 18, whatever it was, the Pope defined it and said, the church believes this, not I hereby invent this teaching, but the church believes this, and it should be documented basically that this is our position. This is the church's position.
Mm-hmm.
That was about the bodily assumption of Mary. And the other one was about the Immaculate Conception of Mary, which means she was conceived without original sin. She was redeemed by the sacrifice of Jesus before her, at her conception, right? Now, I know that's a bit of a time warp, but what we're saying is sin is a problem for humanity, and humanity needs that problem solved. And the problem and the solution in God's gratuitous mind is that he would give his life for the sake of his children, right? Jesus would offer his blood as an atoning sacrifice for warped, untrusting, decaying humanity, right? And the blood refashions us or renders us fit for heaven, ready, like heavenly. Yeah, it makes us a new creature. Now, in terms of time and space, it would seem that people can only share in that after the sacrifice of Jesus, right? Like, obviously, he has to be sacrificed for people to have his blood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So only people after Jesus can be sinless, right? Wrong. For two reasons. And I'm going to say something that's perfectly scriptural and perfectly like open to all Christians, but it's like the blood. I'm adding a little segue in there, if you don't mind, adding a little thing in there before I get to Mary. But in the Exodus story, right? Israel are slaves in Egypt, and they're in trouble, and God performs all these miracles, and Pharaoh still hasn't let them go. And the last of the miracles is that the firstborn of the Egyptians are struck dead, and the Israelites are kept safe. How are they kept safe? Because the blood of a goat or a lamb is put on the doorposts of the Israelites' houses. And if they're in those houses, then the spirit of death hovers over Egypt, kills all the firstborn of the Egyptians, doesn't touch the Hebrews. And it's like, Paul talks about this in Hebrews. He's like, I think it's Hebrews. He's like, is there something like magic about goat's blood? Like, what does goat's blood have, some kind of like special radioactive power or something? It was only efficacious. And we're getting back to symbols and the power and it's getting back to symbols and the real power of symbols. The blood of the goat was powerful because it resembled the blood of Jesus that would be shed centuries later, right? Isn't that boss? It's like goat's blood doesn't have any power. Oh, wait a minute. It's pointing forward to the blood of Jesus. Yeah, that has absolute loads of power. Okay, cool. That'll be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a purely scriptural thing. And the church dogmatically said, yeah, the same thing happens with Mary, where for the sake of bearing a savior to the world, she was washed, freed of original sin at her conception by virtue of the blood of Christ, who she was going to give birth to. Isn't that cool?
That's awesome.
That was infallibly declared.
Right.
And it
Okay,
wasn't
gotcha.
invented. It's not like a cool random inspiration that the Pope had.
Uh-huh.
It was...
It was believed.
It was
throughout
believed.
history.
It was believed.
Right.
And what the Pope
It
does...
was really just made official as a belief of the Catholic Church.
Correct.
Okay.
And all of the doctrines of the church have happened that way. Like, when did the Trinity become a dogma? At a certain point in time. And it's like, oh, they invented the Trinity in the year X. No, they didn't. It was in the faith. Like think of the Catholic faith or the Christian faith as like a seed. And in that seed, when it germinates, like all this stuff comes out of it. And eventually there's this gigantic oak tree. And it's like, hey, you invented this oak tree. We used to just have this seed.
Right.
No, the faith had that in it.
Right.
And has been infallibly sort of teased out over time.
Right.
He's good with that symbolic
that's really
definition.
good. Yeah.
Like, it's good. I would have used a mustard tree, but
No comment.
Cool. I think we're gonna have to wrap it there.
Good.
This is definitely part one. There's more parts to come.
Part one.
I feel like if we wanted to go all day, but
We could, of course.
100%. We'll have to come back for some new topics. I definitely got one in mind, but I know that would just open up another can of worms. So thank you for your
keen to hear
time.
yeah, teaser.
Yeah.
I might tease it. I might tease a little bit. It was when we stayed back one night after Muay Thai, talking to Matty, and Matty was talking about, staying where you were born, more like Gladstone, almost like staying in the
yeah,
community. Like,
yep.
why are you running away from where you are born? And that,
Yeah.
and he made the joke that I bet you want to go to Dubai, and I was like,
You actually
dude,
did.
he got it. Like, I'm just out of the head.
Yeah.
And then he was talking about, like, why would you want to go to a land where it's not Christian occupied, would you say? It's more Muslim. And I thought about it, and I thought about, well, if God is the creator and we believe that,
Wow.
then God created that land, and God created Muslims, and he created,
Yeah.
Let's
he
talk about
created
worm later.
atheists. And
Yeah. I'm
He
excited for
created
that,
atheists.
man.
that's
That's
why.
gotta be sick.
So
Yeah.
that'll be for next time. But that's where I'm getting at is,
God bless you, Lachy. Good.
it's a conversation that I'm sure we would
Matty
all
gonna
enjoy
shoot
to
you
have.
down.
Yeah.
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 That'll be awesome.
I feel like I'm a bad guy.
Hey, you're like one of the Avengers.
All right. Thank you, brothers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.